Morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Creator Town Hall for another week here on Studio Live today. And I'm going to cut straight to the chase because I don't have to bear the burden of all of the topics and all the conversation here today because I've got a very special guest, and it is from the Song Surfing Podcast and the Song Spark composition group over on Facebook. It is our friend John Kehl. How are you doing today, John?
Hello, Pete Johns. How are you?
I'm exceptionally well. Thank you so much for being here. I love it when we've got a guest on the Creator Town Hall because, as I was saying to you pre-show, it gives me a chance to actually not have to come up with all the ideas and all the topics. And you've got a heap of topics to talk about here today. But for the few folks here in the community that don't know you, who you are and what you do, why don't you give us a quick 30-second rundown of the John Kehl story?
All right. So I've got a podcast, music discovery podcast called Song Surfing. I run a songwriting group on Facebook called Song Spark, releasing my own music under the name Oodles. And by day, I'm a music teacher. I'm a band director. So I teach middle school age kids to play woodwind, brass, and percussion instruments. So just all around immersed in music and music related stuff.
That is super cool. And many of you may remember, if you've been around the channel a while, I interviewed John. Oh, that's got to be going on nearly 2 years ago now, John. It's been a long time back. And we talked all about that and about your education and about being a music teacher. And that was pre the C word. So obviously things have changed quite a bit for you during that time. How things been tracking with remote education and that sort of thing with being a music teacher? It could be a tough gig right now, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I don't want to make it out like it's all been bad because there have been some things that, being in this new situation, it's forced me to try some things differently. So there were some discoveries I made that I'm planning on continuing to use going forward. But one of the big things that's been difficult is teaching band. A huge part of that experience is the kids playing together, learning how to, all the skills that go along with that, being able to play independently, be able to fit your part in with the other parts, playing in tune, responding to others, all the stuff that goes along with ensemble playing, and none of that is possible in its original form, at least. I mean, I've been trying to find ways to not let those skills go away, find ways so that the kids still, learn how to play in tune and all this stuff. But it's not quite the same, without them being able to play together in real time.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know that a lot of people here in the community and a lot of folks that watch this channel have been having similar sort of experience because they normally play with other people or they're in bands or they have that interaction. And remote does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't do that physical, like getting in the pocket with another musician. There's nothing quite like doing that in person. So yeah, I can imagine that for a band or for a band leader, that's going to be a challenging thing. But like you say, I think we've also learned that a lot of things, like the thing that we're doing right here, right now, where that you and I could be on different sides of the planet and we're talking to people about what we love, which is music and songwriting and podcasting. So there's definitely some benefits, and I think I've learned and a lot of folks have learned to collaborate more effectively over this time because we've had to, regardless of where you are. So very, very cool. So we're going to dive straight into some cool topics here because John, if you know John, he's a teacher, so he's very got a lot of detail behind what he's done here. So he's done all the hard work for me. So I do thank you for that, John. But you came to me, let's talk starting a podcast, because I know a lot of people in the community are podcast listeners. I'm a podcast listener. I've dabbled in my own podcast. I did the Home Studio Q&A podcast for a while until I didn't because this show replaced it. Maybe this show becomes a podcast in the future, but I'm going to be listening to your tips to find out if I should do that. But what drove you to start your own podcast and get happening with the Song Surfing Podcast? What was that initial trigger that made you want to do this?
There are a couple different parts to that answer. I mean, really the original thing that got me into podcasts to begin with was years ago, I was going through a divorce and just suddenly had a whole lot of free time on my hands, I mean, just along with that goes, all the emotion and loneliness, and having podcasts to listen to was like having a friend in the night. And so I knew that I wanted to start one myself because they are accessible. That's one of the awesome things about podcasts is they can be, professional radio quality or a few friends hanging out in their living room recording on their phone. And people listen to all sorts of different kinds. So I knew that I wanted to start one. I wanted to be able to connect with people. And then the pandemic happened, and bands that I listened to, performers that I liked, couldn't play anymore. And I thought that, that would be a good time to start it. So Song Surfing is the podcast, and my goal is to introduce independent artists to the world. So what I do is, for each episode, I put together a playlist of songs that I find from around the world. And I focus on diversity, not just in genre, and it is really diverse genre-wise. You'll hear Nigerian hip-hop, followed by Scandinavian hardcore punk, classical, pretty much everything. But I also like to find diversity of artists, so you'll have all sorts of different folks from different backgrounds. I've had some bands that are on indie labels and have somewhat of a following. And I also have people who, have, 3 followers on Bandcamp, that kind of thing. So it's really, I don't search for any certain type. I just browse all the different streaming sites, Bandcamp and Spotify and whatnot, and make a list, reach out to the artists, and then I put together the playlist when I've gotten permission. I like, an eclectic playlist. I like listening to a lot of different types of music, and I like also, finding those hidden gems. And, I'm hoping that the listeners do too. I can't be alone in this.
No, absolutely. And I think, the new music and back in the day when I listened to radio, finding new music and being part of that. Look, there is a little bit of like the coolest factor of knowing about stuff that other people don't know about. And then when you see it become popular, like you were there at the start and you were there part of it before anyone else knew about it. But yeah, it's also a great service because, as you know, I do a show, or you may know, I do a show called Your Music Live, which has a very similar kind of premise, which is that there's a heap of really talented independent artists out there that are just not getting the exposure and not getting the play, mostly because people don't know about it. And then you've got a huge group of music fanatics like you and me and everyone else in this community that want to know where the cool music is, but they can't always find it. So connecting those two groups is something that's pretty awesome. And kudos to you. So do go over songsurfingpodcast.com, or I'm assuming you can go to your favorite podcatching device on your Apples and your Spotify's and the rest of the places.
Yeah, and I actually have a link that I can give you.
Oh, cool.
If I knew where I put it, Pete. This makes for a good show.
Yeah, that's all right.
This document is too long.
Right, like I say, John has he's got all the planning in the world done here. So we've got everything we've got there. It is linked down in the description, by the way, if you do want to jump straight to songsurfingpodcast.com. So here's
the single click subscription link, so it'll take you automatically to whatever you have on your phone, Google Podcasts or Apple or Spotify.
Excellent. Let's throw that there, and I'm going to pop that in the comments. So whether you're watching on Twitch or YouTube or Facebook, you'll be able to see that. So song-surfing.captivate.fm/listen. But yeah, we've done you a solid there. I'll put that in the show notes and the description as well. So if you want to just click or tap on that one on your device, you can go and subscribe, and I recommend you do that. And many friends and friends of this channel and friends of the community here have already been guests on the podcast. So maybe explain to folks that you do 2 different types of podcasts. You've got one where you're just talking about music, and then you have special guest editions. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the regular episodes are the playlist episodes and I'll play the songs and I'll do commentary in between. I'll basically tell what I liked about the song or what grabbed me about the song. And then occasionally the artist will record a voice memo introduction too. So I'll play that if they were able to give me something like that. But I'm also occasionally throwing in bonus episodes that I'm calling Song Surfing with Friends. And on those, the guest picks out the featured music, which is nice because, even though I try to cover a whole bunch of different genres, I mean, it's still going to be, making the selections based on my own personal tastes and preferences. So having the guests helps diversify things. But then we talk about songwriting too. or various other things that come up in
Yeah.
the conversation. When Glenn Clark was on, we also talked about rollerblading a little bit.
Yeah.
That's one of his passions. So it's
Absolutely.
been fun getting to know the artists. So far, all the guests that I've had on have been people who've been featured previously on an episode. Although I do have some episodes that are recorded or in the works that are just some connections that I've made. One of the upcoming guests is Dan Hall, who runs the In the Key of Q
Oh,
podcast,
yeah.
who I've been
Cool.
sharing promotions with.
Very cool. Yeah, and like, I was amazed because I started listening to the podcast obviously because I'm like, hey, it's John from the Songspark group, and we had a chat and you were going to get a podcast together. And then I'm listening to it, and I'm like, wait a minute, Glenn Clark is your
Yeah,
guest on the
I
first
know
show,
that
and then I'm
guy.
like, wait a minute, Derek Smith, and I'm like, wow, and then Derek's talking about a John Silver song, and I'm like, wow, the community is so huge, but it's also such a tight knit group because there's so many cool people, and you're finding all of these different artists, and then they're recommending their favorite artists, and I think that's what it's so good. It's like a non-evil network marketing where there's no benefit for doing this except for the fact that you get to find really good music that maybe you didn't know about. And I know that's the Songspark group, which we'll talk about a bit later in the show. That's another way that I've been able to discover a lot of cool artists like yourself and like Jason and like Josh and all of these guys. So yeah, having the Song Surfing podcast now, that when I'm out and about and I'm walking around, I can listen in and I can find all this cool new music. So it's super, super, super cool. We'll talk about your experience starting the podcast in a minute because I know you've got a lot to share, and many folks may be sitting back there either thinking, wonder what it's like behind the scenes. How do you actually do it? Or maybe some of you are actually considering making your own podcast. So
Do it.
we'll get John's thoughts on that in a moment. But first, we haven't said good day to the folks who are here live. So let's give a quick shout out. We've got N. Ezekiel Bahane. I hope you're doing well. Joe Glenn's here. We've got Mr. Mark Bro in the house as well. Tom Rochelle, Thomas Christ, had a great live show on the weekend. The man himself, we were just talking about, Mr. Derek Smith, thank you for being here as well. We've got The Real Fiddlement, Joe Glenn is here. We've got Kim, thank you for joining us here live. Scrolling on down to try and not miss anybody. Dan Eckberg, there you go. Dan says, John, thanks for playing my song on the last song.
I know, Dan. Hi, Dan.
There you go. So yeah, I told you we're a close knit group, and hello to Peter as well. If you are here and you've got questions, we can put John on the spot. If you've got questions about being a band leader, about creating a podcast, about running a successful songwriting Facebook group, whatever it happens to be, John has many hats and many areas of expertise. So feel free to throw a question and just put the word question in front of the comment. That way, while John's throwing down the knowledge and dropping the truth bombs, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and if any questions come up, we will hit the halt button and we'll talk about them. But let's jump back over here. So apart from chatting to me and me saying, I use Anchor, I don't know what else to tell you, I'm not very good at this stuff. What was your research process like? What was it like when you were at the infancy stage getting set up, and how did you get from there to a podcast that you're now putting out on a regular basis?
So if you could see the podcast planning Google Doc that I have, it's insane. I basically plan things out for 3 months, and that's, everything, finding out just how do you start a podcast, just Googling that basic stuff. And I had to find out how to host the episodes. So that's, let me flip over to my notes. So I needed to get a podcast host, and I use Captivate. There are a whole bunch of different ones, though. I had to plan out just what exactly I wanted the show to be, and that's, I think, probably the most important thing that you have to do. Because I wanted to come up with something that wasn't just, one of a million of the same thing. Like if you try to start a movie podcast, you're going to have a lot of competition. There aren't too many music discovery podcasts out there, though. So that was one thing. I wanted it to be something that I'm passionate about too, so that I could sustain it for as long as I want to. I wanted this to be an ongoing thing, not just do it for a few months and then stop. And then I had to plan the format. So just the nuts and bolts of how the episodes will work. And I came up with a mission statement. So that was the whole focusing on independent artists from around the world, and with a focus on diversity, both in terms of the artists and also the genre that spotlighted. So that was all stuff that I had planned out ahead of time. And then there's other things like having the With Friends episodes that I kind of have been doing as I go, as I've gotten to know the artist through email correspondence and whatnot. I felt
Mm.
like, oh, this would be a cool additional thing that I do. And I set a bunch of goals. So you'll see all this stuff on the planning document. And I made a super long to-do list and have just been checking it off as I go. So it's really been a real challenge on me organizationally.
Yeah.
I guess that's not something that I naturally excel at. So it's kind of forced me to step up my game a little bit there.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like there's a lot to think about, and I guess it's probably what holds a lot of people back from music as well as from doing a podcast is understanding the nuts and bolts and how things actually work together. How hard did you find it then, like getting that first episode out? What were some of sort of the barriers that you had, or some of the challenges or hurdles that you had along the way to actually getting that first episode in the can and out on the platform for people to listen to?
For me, the hardest thing was the website, and it still is. It's a WordPress site, and I, I mean, it's powerful, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. People do awesome things with their WordPress site, but for
Yeah.
me, it's the challenge there is a combination of lack of technology savvy and also lack of really wanting to learn it.
Yeah.
It's like lowest on my list of things that I'd like to be doing. So that's really been my biggest challenge, I would say, is just getting the website looking normal. And just when I finally did, they updated WordPress a couple of days ago, and it looks all jacked up now. So I know what I'm going to be doing next weekend. Probably the easiest thing for me though was just the actual putting the episode together, because I don't know, I
Mm.
feel like I've listened to so many podcasts that I know the tropes. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
how people tend to open, what they do in the middle, how they close it. I know what I like and what I don't like. And so putting that first script together, since I had all the parts planned out and I knew what songs I was going to play and I had an idea of what I wanted to say, that was pretty smooth.
Yeah.
Which is good. If I had to completely start from scratch there and I was listening to podcasts going, what's a podcast? Then I don't know how that would have turned out.
Yeah, no, and it's really clear that that's the case, and that's the thing. I think people want to reinvent the wheel, and people want to do something that's so unique and so different. And sometimes just understanding what the best practices are and realizing that 100, 1,000 people that came before you have already worked out a lot of the kinks, and they've already ironed out and got the bugs sorted. So you don't always have to do something completely revolutionary. It can be an evolutionary thing that you can put your own spin on a format that's already working. And I know some of the we'll talk to them later, but some of the existing music discovery type shows that I've listened to in the past, like Song Exploder, they have a really good format, and they talk about the song, they talk about the artist, they play the song, and they really break it down in a good way. And that there's a reason why almost all podcasts have fairly similar formats these days, because it's effective, it keeps attention, and that's what I love listening to Song Surfing. I love the fact that it's just the right length. Not to big note you too much, but I like the fact that I think sometimes podcasts are too long, and sometimes they just don't get into the meat of stuff. And I think there's such a fine balance there. How did you determine that? Like, did you have a plan going in that I want each episode to be this amount of time? I want to make sure that I'm saying this but not saying that. How did you work that? Because you said the format came easily to you. How did you work that and make sure that you hit the right point when it came to the length of the show?
For me, it would I be able to listen to this on my drive to work?
Right.
So 40 to 60 minutes is what I go for.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is like with the regular songs episodes, I usually play 6 or 7 songs, depending on the length.
Yeah.
So that there's a little bit of fluctuation depending on how long the songs are. But
Sure.
yeah, I didn't want to do 10 or 12 songs or like a full album every week. I think that'd be too cumbersome, and I don't think it'd be great for the artist either. I mean, it's kind of like how many people would listen to the whole thing. There'd be, if an artist was at the end of the episode, they'd be less likely to be heard. So I figured a digestible 6 or 7 songs, people can listen to that in one sitting on a walk when they're walking their dog or whatever. And everybody that's featured gets heard at least.
Yeah. Very cool. We've got some comments from folks here. So Dan Ekberg saying his favourite podcast are John's. There you go. Got a fan. The Punk Rock MBA and JVO's Car Con Carney. Derek says he hopes No, neither have I. Derek hopes your students don't hear you saying that learning something was lowest on the list. Don't let that escape out there from their teacher. And Mark says
Well,
yes.
I want to be clear. It's not learning something. It's learning how to how to design a website. That's definitely lowest on the list. Ugh.
That's a good point. It's not exactly John's forte. And I think it's a good point, and we'll talk later as well. Got a lot of things to talk about this show. It's going to be a good one. We'll talk later about letting go of some things, and that may be something. I know it's something that I'm considering now. Is I really need a web designer because my web creation and design skills are pretty shoddy, and I'm the same. I don't have the time or the energy to learn a lot of new things about a field that's not my sort of passion. But letting go of some of those things and getting support where you need it. So I think it's actually a good lesson, Derek, about playing to your strengths, not being afraid to collaborate with other people when you need to. There you go. We've got a second from Tom on the Punk Rock MBA. So there you go. There's one that I'll need to add to my ever-growing podcast list as well. And Mark's going to comment here, start with what works and move from there. So I think that's a really good point, that for music and for what John's done with this podcast is that, knowing the format and getting that set, and then it is actually a good idea to save. Not that you need to avoid the things that are going to be more challenging, but build up your confidence by knowing what you want to do and tackling the things that you're actually good at before you actually go and learn the other thing. Because to me, that was it. The website and the hosting were the two things that I was most scared of doing a podcast, whereas the actual creation of the audio and the content was a lot easier. Speaking of the audio and the content, it's probably a good segue. In terms of actually creating the podcast, so you talked, you've got to have Captivate, or I use Anchor.fm. There's a bunch of different providers. That's where you host it, and some of them are free, some are paid. You generally need some sort of web presence. I know some podcasts just have a Facebook book group or a Facebook page or whatever, but having a website's pretty important if you've got a podcast that you want to promote, because that's what you can send people to. What about the logistics of actually recording it, especially since you're bringing in audio that you're playing back people's songs? Sometimes you're having guests on the show. How do you manage that and get good quality audio?
Yeah, well, that's a continual work in progress. But I mean, at the bare minimum, you just need a way to record yourself. And there's one podcast I know for sure that I listen to that's got a lot of listeners and has been around for years and years, where they just record with condenser mics and GarageBand.
Yep.
So it's not like, everyone's using Pro Tools and super pro quality equipment. So I love that about it. It's accessible. So for me, I use the SM7B that I have here, my interface. I record either in Logic or GarageBand, depending on, what the home situation is at the time and whether I can be in my studio. And, I just edit it in Logic. It's pretty basic, really. I mean, if you know how to record a song, you know how to record a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what about the guest side of things? Because that's something that can be tricky. How do you get good quality audio from a guest? Is that over a Skype thing, or do you do what they call in the industry a double ender, where you get them to record as well? How do you get good quality with a guest on a podcast?
So far, I haven't had a guest that doesn't have the means to record on their end. So that's the way I've been going, is we each record on our end. They send me their copy unedited, and then I work my magic from there. I haven't had a guest that doesn't have that capability. So I'm gonna have to pick your brain about that, Pete, and see. I'm not sure what way to go.
It is tough. It's hard to get that, because if anyone that's used Skype or Zoom or Google Meet or any of those sort of things, or even StreamYard, like StreamYard's great for doing what we're doing here and for a video presence here. But if this was going out as a podcast, I don't know, that podcast listeners maybe expect a different level of quality, and any of those glitches that you get and those weird speed up bits where you go really quickly because the internet dropped out, that you get when you're doing something like this.
I love that stuff.
Oh, right. It's just like, and then it just goes 1,000 miles an hour. It can be a challenge. But like you say, most of the time, and I guess you're blessed to be working, and your content, your podcast topic is music. So you know that someone's probably got at least a semi-decent home recording rig at their end if they're creating home recordings. So
yeah, they probably have nicer stuff than I do. So.
Your audio quality is coming through beautifully there, John. I'm every time I listen to someone through a Shure SM7B, I get slightly closer to pulling the trigger and buying one because I don't know, they're overhyped, I think, these days because everyone's using them because they look cool, but I think they actually sound cool too, and I'm very close. What do you think? Should I buy one? Is that my next
I
question?
like it, but I'm no mic expert. It's not like I have, 40 different mics to compare it to. So
Yeah.
it's better than what I had. I'll say
Mm.
that, but I don't know if
Yeah.
it's the best mic out there.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. It's not about the gear, remember, folks. We talk about that all the time.
Right.
It's the content, not necessarily the gear. So I've got a question for the audience watching here. So obviously, my statement is go and subscribe to Song Surfing and check it out. Listen to, I think the Glenn Clark episode's a good entry one because I think that gives you an idea of it and you get to hear Glenn's dulcet New Zealand accent come through there. So jump in there and take a listen to there. But we're up to episode 12 there, your latest episode here on your WordPress site. So you can go and subscribe and check that one out. But my question for the folks out there is, how many podcasts, firstly, do you listen to podcasts? So I want a yes, no, but instead of saying yes, how many podcasts per week do you think you listen to? I'd be really interested to find out because I'm sitting at about 6 at the moment. Anytime I go over about 6 a week, I tend to spend too much time. But I do a lot of walking, and I don't have a commute anymore because I work from here. So when I'm out walking, it's always a podcast that I throw on. So let us know here in the chat if you're here live. Do you listen to podcasts? Yes or no? And if yes, how many per week you think you listen to? I'm intrigued by that. John, how many podcasts a week do you think you listen to right now?
Well, when I was driving to work, it was a lot more, but now 5 or 6, I would say. Yeah. And the ones that I listen, well, we'll get into the list of music related podcasts, but the one that I would say I never miss is a comedy podcast called Doughboys. It's these two comedians reviewing chain restaurants.
Oh, wow.
So if you're into comedy, and a lot of times crude comedy, that would be a good one to check out. But yeah, 5 or 6.
Nice. I'm trying to find Doughboys now, but it's bringing up Doughboy Pizza here in Australia, which is apparently the name of the pizza joint here. So there you
sounds
go.
Good.
Oh no, I'm getting hungry now. Feeling like some pizza, even though it's only 9 o'clock in the morning here. Is there anything else? So we've talked about. I'm looking at your notes here. We've talked about the planning side of things, and when you were getting there, the nuts and bolts in terms of how to actually record it and how you do that. Is there anything else on that? I guess in terms of the admin, or I know that a lot of people would say, oh, how do you structure it? How do you make sure that you can get your guests scheduled, and how do you set aside the time, and then how long does it take? So is there anything else you want to talk about the nuts and bolts side of podcasting or getting it done?
Well, for me, the one of the crucial things is I script it, and I'll sort of improvise off of the script too, because I don't want it to sound just like I'm robotically reading. But I need to do that, otherwise every episode will be full of likes, ums, and uhs, and knows. So that's for me crucial. It's got to be scripted. I don't know that everyone does that. I'm not an improviser in that sense. Let's see here. And then I think just having some sort of system for organization is important. So your Google Doc, calendar, whatever you're going to write your scripts in, your podcast email, the planning document. I use all of that stuff constantly. I've got what is it called? A Google Sheet where I keep track of all the songs and the guests and all of my notes on that. So when I emailed whom, whether I've gotten permission for the song, what they still need to send me, all of that is in that Google Sheet. So if that Google Sheet goes away, I'm in trouble. But yeah, that's crucial, because if I don't know how else I would keep track of that. It needs to all be in one place. There are too many moving pieces.
Yeah. No, it's and I guess again, I think that's something that it not intimidates people, but might put some people off doing what you do. Is that it would require a lot of that. But I guess the other side of that is that if someone's out there and they've got something to share, is it fair to say that you've probably jumped in sort of head first in terms of the complexity of a podcast, given that you have to play music, you have to have guests on there, you have to get clearance for music, you have to communicate with all the people. I guess it's a bit harder than say something like the Doughboys, where they're just like, hey, here's why Taco Bell is really cool, or whatever it is, more of a commentary podcast. Would that be fair to say?
I think most podcasts behind the scenes have their share of preparation and work that goes into it. Like I said, with mine, it's securing the rights, keeping track of correspondence with all the artists. I shouldn't say rights, but securing permission to play the music. And then editing is something too.
Yeah.
But I mean, even on, I don't know, like if you think of any storytelling podcasts, like
Mm.
Disgraceland comes to mind, where every week the host tells a story of a musician getting into trouble, and he has to write a whole story for every episode.
Yeah.
I imagine that script's fairly long to fill up a 45-minute episode. So there is, even the Doughboys have a lot that goes into it, because they have to
Yeah.
actually go out and eat at the restaurant and then get their guests, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, oh, very good. Yeah, no, it's cool. So with all I'm just looking at your doc as we're talking through here, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm probably throwing John way out of his comfort zone here, because the way that I do things is very haphazard now. Like, I do plan around things, but I guess yeah, when you talk about scripting, yeah, John would have seen in the pre-show, my scripting is yeah, read through John's doc, and then I make some dot points, and then we just start talking. So
Yeah, that's
I think it's
awesome. I'm impressed that you can do that.
Oh, it's taken a long time. Like, many times I'm sitting here doing a show or I'm doing something. I'm like, I can see why people script, because anything can happen when you're live. But I think that's part of the fun as well. That anything can indeed happen. But yeah, I do sometimes sit here craving. I'm like, wouldn't a nice scripted podcast be nice, where I can have a second take if I want one? It's not all just live. Let's have a look at folks and their podcasting habits here. So Gary Hub says no, because when he's walking, he struts his stuff. Yes, that's not surprising from Gary. Dan Eckberg, 3 to 4 per week. Derek's listening to 1 or 2. Hopefully one of those is song surfing. Peter's 1 or 2. Kim doesn't listen to podcasts, never have, just listen to music, especially when driving. Mark's listens to 2, used to be 4, but I ditched the sailing podcast when I sold the boat. It is interesting, isn't it? Like, when you get into a topic, you go and find a podcast on that topic, and then it's funny, as your interest wanes in a particular topic, you might sort of fall away and not listen to that as well. I did that with ice hockey. Yeah, when the hockey, when they go through their strikes that they do every few years and their lockouts, I'm just like, yeah, I forget to listen to the podcast for a while, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I used to like hockey and listen to that podcast. N Ezekiel Bohin says at 1 or 2. Joe, yes, rarely, maybe 1 per week. So yeah, it's a mixed bag there. So bit of competition there, John. Considering people are listening to maybe only 2 or 3 or 4 podcasts a week, I think that they should make Song Surfing one of those podcasts that they listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. They should listen to Song Surfing and your podcast, and then
Yes.
circle back and listen to them again.
So in terms of that, so we'll sort of move on from here to some other topics here. If you do have more podcasting questions though for John, feel free to ask them. Just throw a question in front of your question, and John will be able to, there we go, do that, and we'll be able to ask John what's what with podcasting. But something that you've obviously, as a teacher, continuing to learn and continuing what I call like a lifelong learning journey with your music and with creativity, because this is the Creator Town Hall. It's what we talk about. You've got some ideas here. You've got some books and some podcasts and some other things around music and around discovering music that you've given me links to here. So maybe start with the podcast that you've put out there. You've got a few here. So do you want to go through some of those and let us know what you would recommend outside of song surfing?
Yeah, so I put yours on here, the home studio Q&A. I don't know if you talk about that too often, but
it's yeah, I need to make a decision on that. Maybe during this show we can come to a decision. So yes, home studio Q&A hit the skids at episode 67, because that was the last one that we did, and since then the show doesn't exist anymore, so the podcast doesn't. But yeah, the question is here: do I make this show the replacement podcast and just continue on over there? Because I think this is more like a podcast and more like what that show was. But yeah, let's just say on hiatus. So feel free to go and listen to the back episodes. I'm sure there's some fun stuff in there, but maybe it will come back eventually.
yeah, I think you should take these episodes and split them up into 2 parts.
Ah, there you go. See,
It's
this is why I have smart people like John on board. He can give me this sort of advice.
well, I didn't tell you, Pete. I'm charging you for my consultation. So
there we go. I was wondering what that little link in the bottom that I didn't click that said,
Yeah,
here's
surprise.
the terms of service you will be paying, John. Cool. What else have you got? What other podcasts would you recommend listening to?
all right. Well, the other one is Recording Studio Rockstars, and you were actually a guest on that. I meant to look up what episode you were on, but I forgot.
I've forgotten to. Yeah, you can. He does so many there. What are we up to? 297. That Lidge does his show there. So you'll find me back there in the archives. But yeah, he also talks to professional folks as well. So
Yeah. So
what do you like about Recording Studio Rockstars?
well, the episodes feature, it's an interview show, and each episode features usually a recording engineer. Sometimes, like we had Pete Johns on there, or sometimes you get producers, guitar players, but it's mainly focused on recording studio people, and they have like the storytelling portion of it where they tell their backstory and about their experiences, and then they have the ending section is the jam session where they just rattle through a bunch of nuts and bolts types of questions. And I think most of your viewers are home recording people, right? So I think that would be a really good one to check out if you were unaware of that, because you get so many good tips from there, and with huge people too. I mean, couple of the recent guests, Efreid Shippen, Vance Powell, and then Steve Albini's been on there a couple times. Even if you just listen to their episodes alone, you would get so much. And they really, the host Lid Shaw has a good way of directing the conversation so that it helps both novice musicians and recordists, if that's a word, and even more advanced folks. And I find that I can re-listen to episodes 6 months apart and get a whole different set of things out of it. So really great and entertaining too.
Yeah, and I mean, Lidge, I used to say Lidge is a cool dude, and he has an epic beard. He used to. He shaved off the beard.
He's clean shaven now.
He is, but no, he's recording, like, owns a recording studio, the Toy Box Studios in Nashville, and a really interesting story behind him and some of the battles that he's had having a home recording studio in Nashville. So you can look up that, because basically Nashville, the music capital of the world, let alone the States, outlawed home studios and said, no, you can't run a business as a home studio from your own house in Nashville, which was kind of crazy. So
seems a little short-sighted.
Just a little bit, especially in 2019 when it was all happening. It's like, wow, this is the where home recording is taking over the world, and you're saying that, and just between you and me, I can't not think that there was a little bit of greasing of palms from some of the professional studios that might have had something to do with those sort of laws. But anyway, that's for another day. You got another one in here. What else would you recommend?
So this is another along the same lines as Recording Studio Rockstars. It's Mixing Music Podcasts. So it's hosted by two recording engineers, and the format's different on this show. It's the same in the sense that you get a lot of good tips from there, but each episode has a theme, and they'll do an episode on condenser mics, an episode on how to choose what compressor to use. So it's more focused on, how to actually do the engineering side of things. And they also talk about their experiences in the studio, and they'll give tips for people who are trying to make it as mixing engineers. So whether that's you or not, I think if you're just recording your own music at home, I think you'll get some good tips out of that. And the episodes are shorter than Recording Studio Rockstars, so it's more of a, you can listen to while you're doing the dishes, that sort of thing. Just a quick thing.
Yeah, that's one thing we probably should have mentioned about Recording Studio Rockstars. It is not short. So in terms of that drive to work commute kind of length, I think my episode was about 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I think some episodes have topped the 3-hour mark when they really get deep into a topic. So yeah, it sounds like if you want the deep dive stuff, go and listen to Lidge. If you want the just the facts, man, then Mixing Music sounds like it could be more. And again, I'm not subscribed to this podcast, so you've given me something else to listen to now as well, to fill my days, which is a good thing. And thank you to Tom, who's here, one of our wonderful moderators, who's helping out. There you go. You've got the links, mixingmusicpodcast.com. You can jump over to that one. Now, you're very kind here because you're a music discovery show, but you're actually going to tell folks about some other competitors that are music discovery shows as well, which may or not be a wise decision, but we'll see. What other music discovery podcasts are out there that folks should be considering?
All right. So I think that these two aren't they're not like, buried treasures or something. All Songs Considered is an NPR podcast. It's been around for, I don't know, 20 years or something. It started off as, I think, just internet based before podcasts were a thing. You could just download it from the NPR website.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's kind of the inspiration for song surfing, I would say. I mean, there are a lot of similarities in format. And what I really like about them is they, for years, have been focusing on non-mainstream artists. This was one of the only places where you would hear a lot of women voices on songs.
Yeah.
So I think that's it's worth checking out. And the hosts are passionate and positive, and I borrow a lot and draw a lot of inspiration from what they do.
And yeah, NPR is not really a thing here in Australia, so I'm not that familiar.
Oh, okay.
But I am familiar with the fact that apparently they ask you to donate to help support the public broadcasting. And as soon as I went onto that page, it popped up and said, "Hey, would you like to donate?" So I guess that's something to keep in mind. That you may want to support NPR.
It's a worthy cause. Yeah.
There you go, helping artists and helping a company that's an organisation that's helping artists. The next one you got here is one that I'm a huge fan of. I love this because they've covered some of my favorite artists and I learn something every time, and that's Song Exploder. What do you like about Song Exploder?
Yeah, Song Exploder is awesome. So each episode focuses on one song, and the artist basically gives the journey of how the song came to be created and recorded. And you get to hear a lot of times they play parts soloed, so you can hear the bass line develop or the different versions of the vocal. And then often they have it like the story of the song. And then you hear how it all comes together at the end. And they've had a lot of big name, but up and coming artists on there too. So it's a pretty cool mix.
Yeah, like I was scrolling through there, like you say, it's almost like you recognize every second name. So you have REM, Nine Inch Nails, and then there'll be two that you've never heard of. And I saw that there was Tame Impala there, which is a great artist. And there's so many cool. And I can't remember was it Courtney Barnett? I think was on there.
Yeah.
Like so many good independent artists that you may not know about, and just hearing about the stories behind the song. So this episode I've got here is my favorite because I'm a huge REM fan. So learning the story behind Try Not to Breathe, one of my favorite songs from.
Oh, I love that song. I missed that episode.
Yeah. Well, there you go. John's got some work to do. Yeah, go back and check that out, because just learning not only the story behind the music creation and how they actually recorded the song and the different ideas around the different parts and how it all came together, but also the motivation for the song. It's an amazing show. And if you're not subscribed and listening to Song Exploder, yeah, you should. Because every time I come away from listening to an episode, I'm inspired and I've learnt something new that it seems like I can apply to. And again, you probably don't want to get into learning overload. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But you do need to apply the stuff that you're learning. But if you're on a commute, you're out for a walk, listening to this stuff, learning from the professionals, similar to what we said about you and podcasting. Like there are best practices. I wouldn't say that there's any rules for creativity, but it can't hurt to listen to the stories of someone who's made it, or made it in terms of being a professional musician, because they've been through it. They've been over all the speed humps, and you can actually benefit from that.
Absolutely. So one more thing about Song Exploder, and I think this could be our segue into the next thing. There have been quite a few episodes where it got me thinking of creating it a different way. The episode that comes to mind is the Tune Yards. I think the song was Water Fountain, and the singer and songwriter Meryl was talking about how she wanted the song to sound like it was like the intensity was increasing as the song went on. And so what they decided to do was change key every time the new verse starts. So it would go up a half step each time. And so it was getting higher and higher and higher as the song went on. And I'd never heard of anything. I mean, I've obviously heard of key changes before, but never used in that way. And that was really cool. And it got me thinking in a whole new way. And I don't remember what song I was working on at the time, but I tried that and it I don't know, it just I felt like it opened up a new doorway for me. Plus it was just an entertaining episode.
Very cool. There you go. So there, even more reasons to be tuning into these. So very, very, very cool indeed. Now, the next thing you've put here on the list is something that I'm completely unfamiliar with, and this is The Art of Process with
Oh
Amy Mann
yeah.
and Ted Leo.
I don't think this podcast exists anymore. I think they have
Oh
12
no,
episodes and you can listen to those 12.
there you go.
Um, I hope that they make more one day. So they have different guests on. A lot of them are musicians, but artists too. I think there's an episode with the dancer, and they talk about the creative process and whatever that means to the particular guest. And
Yeah,
it's interesting. It's one of those shows that gets you thinking of things in a different way.
very cool. I like it. And yeah, I hate it when you do that, when you discover something from the past and then you're like, oh, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And then you look at the last date. Like I always do that
Yeah.
check where you check most recent. I'm sure people do that with my podcast. And it's like, oh, this is cool. Well, maybe they say this is cool. And they get, oh, no, he stopped like 6 weeks ago. So yeah, it's always disappointing when you're like, damn it. Like you find a TV show on Netflix. You're like, this show is so cool. Oh, wait, 2 seasons and it started in 2016. I'm in trouble here. So,
Well, everyone go and download all of the episodes of Art of
there you go.
Process, and maybe they'll start making them again.
That's it, and find their contact here. Looks like they got some contact us. Yeah, so just go and email them. We'll just get a mass email saying, "Hey, I was watching this random show on YouTube, and they told me to come and email you and tell you to keep doing the show." There you go. We'll get it up and running. Now, you've actually put a few books on here, which I love because I don't read. Okay, I read a lot. And I don't know as a teacher what your opinion on this, but I use Audible. So I'm a massive audiobook fan. I'll start with this question, and maybe we'll ask this to the folks who are here live as well. But yeah, do you listen to audiobooks, and do you consider audiobooks the same as reading, different from reading? Doesn't matter. What's your thoughts on this, John?
So I don't listen to audiobooks, but it's not that I'm opposed to. They're
Yeah,
just not my go-to. Yeah, I think they're great.
yeah.
I support you if you listen to audiobooks.
You're not a paper book snob where you're like, oh no, digital and audio is not
No,
is not
whatever
a thing.
works. If you don't have any time to sit down and read, if you're always in your car, then listen to audiobooks. Better that than reading on the road and killing somebody.
Well, that's what I figure. I'm like, yeah, as I age, I told a story last week that I fell over, not in a bad way, but I tripped over a bit of pavement as I was walking around the other day, and I'm like, yeah, that's with me listening to things. I'm like, yeah, I see these people out there like on their Kindles or like reading a book as they're walking along, and I'm like, wow, I would be a mess if I did that. So, let's talk about these books that you've got recommended here. So let's go, John's Book Club, Book Corner. What do you recommend here? Number one is this one here. What are we looking at?
All right. So Mixer Man, he's got a bunch of books. The one that I've been reading is called Musician's Survival Guide to a Killer Record. And I think it's the perfect book for where I'm at as a recording person. Yeah, there it is. I'm not a beginner, but I'm not a professional. I think if you were just starting out, I think it's maybe it would be over your head. But if you have some experience already, it dispels a lot of myths. It doesn't, it's not too basic, but it's not super dry either. It's not
Yeah,
like
right.
just reading an acoustics textbook or something. Yeah, really, really
Yeah, cool.
great. And he's not, he doesn't hold back his opinions on things, which makes for a fun read.
Yeah, if you're not aware of Mixer Man, go down the rabbit hole and find out about the backstory there because it's very interesting. And I believe Mixer Man was on a Recording Studio Rockstars podcast. I could be wrong about that one, but
No, I have to look for
I'm
that.
almost sure that he was there. And look, we've got an audiobook, so cool. I can read it then.
Yeah, there you go.
So he narrates it himself. There you go. So that could be an entertaining read. That's one that's going on my wish list for Audible for my next book. I think because I need some musical motivation. And there's not a whole lot of music books out there, especially on the audiobook, which is weird. There's a lot of music books that they've never done an audiobook for, and I find that fascinating. That wouldn't it be the one genre that every single book should be an audiobook, but not necessarily the case. Next up, Jeff Tweedy. What's the
right.
deal here?
So Wilco's Jeff Tweedy wrote
Yeah.
a book on songwriting. He focuses on how to write one song. So rather than making it a definitive guide, he walks you through the process of how he would go about writing one particular song. But along the way, he gives different exercises in writing lyrics, coming up with melodies. But what I really like about it is just it's written in a very informal way.
Mm.
Like you can imagine that you're just sitting down, just having a conversation with Tweety. And I
Yeah.
think that this book would work really, really well in the audiobook format, Pete, just
Yeah.
because of the style that it's written in.
All right, let's check it. Do we have audio?
There
Audible?
has to be. Yeah, there it is.
Has to be an audible book.
Yeah,
There you go.
absolutely.
Who narrates it? There you go. Jeff himself narrates that.
Yeah, it's funny too. Jeff Tweedy's a funny guy, so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, there you go. I got two more books. See, I selfishly, even though I have to pay John, which I didn't realize going in, but I'm happy to pay now because I'm getting some cool new audiobooks. And I was a bit stale. I've been reading a bunch of Stephen King, and there's only so much Stephen King that you can take until you're like, I need to, I need something to not be quite so unsettling while I'm walking around.
You know, it's
But
weird, Pete. I only read Stephen King one time, and it was when I was 9 years old. I read Misery.
oh wow,
And
okay.
I like thinking back, like for one, like I would think that maybe I was just an advanced reader and didn't realize it, but I'm surprised I'm not messed up from that. That's kind of an intense story, right?
That's that. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the more intense ones. That's
Maybe I
yeah.
blocked it all out and just I'm gonna hit 50 and then have all these repressed memories come back.
I think so. It could be worse. Could be it. You'll be suddenly have a
Oh
irrational fear of clowns and not quite
no,
know
I was
why.
afraid of that cover. My mom had it and it would sit on the nightstand and
Oh.
no, that cover is too scary. I wouldn't touch that.
Wow. Now, Tom has put the links to here. You can probably search them up. I'll update the show notes. I've meant to do it as we go, but I'll update the show notes with all of these links afterwards because, again, I can copy and paste them straight from John's amazing Google Doc, as long as he doesn't delete it before I get a chance. So there is the
It's an
Mr.
extra
Man's Guide
fee,
there.
Pete.
Oh, that's an. Oh
Yeah.
man, I knew I should have read your terms and conditions, folks. I didn't do that, and I don't know. I didn't know how much I had to pay. So that is there's three books, and if you've got recommendations, if you're watching here and you've got recommendations of music resources or books or anything, and we'll jump into some hidden gems, some of the sort of like under the leaf kind of things that we'll discover later when we get into that. But yeah, there's some really good stuff there. So you got your home studio Q&A, which doesn't exist anymore, recording studio Rockstars, mixing music podcast, all songs considered, song exploder, Mixer Man's survival to a killer record, how to write one song, and there is one more here that you've given us here on the list, and talk us through Tunesmith. What's this
All
all about?
right. So Jimmy Webb is a legendary songwriter, and this is where the Jeff Tweedy book is a little bit more broad in its focus. Tunesmith goes into incredible detail, and it's
Oh,
awesome for that. He goes really deep on things that you would never think about. Key changes, song form.
mm,
He analyzes the structure to a bunch of vaudeville tunes. So I don't know. If you really want to dig deep on songwriting and be challenged, I think that would be a good book to check out. And he writes it too I don't know how he pulls this off, but he writes it in a way where you can skip around too. So
mm.
if the chapter on theory, when he's getting into harmony and chord structure, if that's over your head, you can just skip around and you'll still get something out of it.
Yeah.
And he even says that in the introduction. He goes deep, but he says, read as much as you're able and want to, and you'll still walk away with something.
Very cool. Yeah, I must admit, I need to learn more about the theory side of music and about the theory of songwriting. I know, and we'll talk about songwriting and we'll talk about the Songspark group. But I must admit, when I first joined the Songspark group and you guys were talking about mixed meters and different keys and chords and diminished this and augmented that, I was a little bit out of my depth. And but the cool thing was, and again, we'll go into more detail. But when you were doing challenges in Songspark and it was to do with a particular thing, I remember the mixed meter one. I'm just like, I assume that mixed meter means two different type signatures, but I didn't really know. And then I think you and Jason like put a link to a video that talked about that. It was the same with what was the rhythm that was what's that rhythm one?
Oh, the Bo Diddley beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that was. And again, thankfully you put a video to that and say, so again, the cool thing about, and we'll talk about Song Spark as well a bit later. The cool thing is that, yeah, I learned stuff. I learned new things from folks that I didn't know before. So Very, very, very cool. Anything else? So I think we've covered the podcasting stuff. We've covered some of your suggestions for continuing to learn. That you got one more note here in your notes, and before we jump into the midpoint motivation that we do each week, why don't you take us through this because it might actually lead into that next thing we're talking about.
Okay, so the last thing this section on this massive document that I put together was called "Continuing to Learn," and the last note on there is find a small chat or email group or group of friends whose opinion you trust and who you can ask dumb questions. So it's there's something to be said for having Facebook groups or Reddit groups or whatever it is where you're posting your song for feedback. But you can also, you'll also get 30 conflicting opinions on your song and, not really know what to do with it. So I have one of my best friends, Jason, who I bounce ideas off of. If I'm not sure if a mix sounds right, I'll send him a song and he does the same for me. And I've got a couple other small groups like that. And I think that that's crucial because you don't want to, when you're trying to decide things like if the arrangement's right, you don't need 30 different opinions. You need one or two opinions that you can count on.
Yeah.
So I think having that small group is crucial. And I don't know about you, but there have been groups that I've left on Facebook for just that are kind of caustic where you feel like you can't ask questions. So I think that for having the group where you can ask dumb questions is really crucial also. Yeah. Ask a question where the people answering are going to appreciate that we're all learning together and not make you feel stupid because you don't know it.
Totally. It's so important, and I probably haven't talked about it much, but I use it, but I haven't sort of promoted it. And it's true that as these groups that I know that you're part of, even the SongSpark group has grown. You've got a lot of members there, and other groups like the GarageBand Users group, the Create, Record, Release group that's the official group of this channel. Once you get up to that, 800, 1,000, or in the case of GarageBand users, like 11,000 members, you can get feedback on your song, but it could be from a vast array of different people. And having that close-knit group, and one of the great things I see happening around the community is that people kind of come together and they're finding people. So, even the fact that you and Glenn Clark and Derek Smith, and I know Glenn and Derek have their own little network, so it kind of creates this maze of people and networks. So you almost have your large network, your medium network, and then you almost have back in my business days I used to promote the triad, like having three. There's a power of three, of having three people is really good, because one-on-one it can be kind of challenging because you're like, oh, it's one person's opinion. It seems that as soon as you introduce a third, it kind of challenges you to have that. So I don't know if that's just a me thing, but I've found that having three people in a group is good. 4 or 5 gets okay. I think once you get past that, it grows too quickly, and then it just becomes a bit of a free-for-all. Has that been your experience, or what do you think sort of the magic number with these smaller groups?
I think the 3 sounds good. For me, I know with my really crucial decisions, I've got my 2 friends that I go to.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I didn't mention, I think that's crucial, is that the people you're getting feedback from are familiar with the genre that your music is in. If you're sending your songs to someone who's really into EDM and you're writing indie folk, like, I don't know that you're going to get much helpful information. So it's got to be the right source that it's coming from also.
Yeah, absolutely. I, as you can imagine, I get quite a few emails and messages through Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and email, like all over the place. And yeah, it's interesting that some of the people will email me and say, hey, Pete, I'm working on this beat and I'm trying to record my rap vocals and I need some help. And I try to be very kind, but my response, the first response in my head is, have you listened to my music? Have you listened to any of the stuff that I've done? Because I'm the last person that you want to ask about recording rap or beats or anything like that, because it's not my fault. I dabble in it because it's fun and I try to do different things. But yeah, you're right. It's strange. Like you don't want to group yourself. You don't want to go, hey, I'm a metalhead, so I'm only going to talk to other metalheads. I'm looking at you, Gary Hubs. I only want to talk to other metalheads because everyone else doesn't matter. Sometimes getting some ideas, and that's why the SongSpark group is so good and why song surfing is so good, because you get ideas from different people and you can sort of come, oh, I never thought of doing it that way from a different genre. But you're right. If you're like, hey, is this indie folk song mixed well? Asking an EDM head, they're probably not going to know. They're probably going to ask you to turn up the bass, which is probably not going to be the right thing for your indie folk song at the end of the day.
Right.
So, good stuff. We're at the midpoint here, folks. I do want to thank everyone for being here. Is there anyone we've missed? I did say hello. I called you out, Gary Hubbs. Hello to you, O'Neill and Jones. Who I don't know if you're aware. Are you aware of O'Neill and Jones, John? Have you heard of their music?
No,
There you go. O'Neill
but
and
I'm
Jones are a
interested.
fantastic acoustic duo, and there you go. O'Neill and Jones. This is John Kehl. He runs a
Hi.
podcast called Song Surfing, and you should get your music on Song Surfing because they are a fantastic independent group. So there
Oh,
you
can
go.
I say that I have a song submission form
Oh,
if you
there
want to
you go.
submit your music for me to check out. And that's on the website, songsurfingpodcast.com.
There you go. Submit your music. I'd missed that myself. So there you go. You can actually go to songsurfingpodcast.com,
Yeah, there's a
submit
link
your
there, or
music.
you could just scroll down to the bottom.
Aha.
Oh, and
There you go.
Gary Hubbs. Gary is the one that started the Logic Pro group, right?
I don't
The
believe so. That might be a different. Gary Hubbs is a metal creator. He uses GarageBand.
Okay,
So
maybe I'm thinking of, so I recognize all these names, but I forget who's
I
from which
know
group.
it is hard. There's so many folks in this community, and they're all doing cool things that yeah, it can get confusing. Yeah, wrong guy. Yeah, Gary's an iOS GarageBand metal guy. So
Okay, all right,
yeah, I
awesome.
wonder who that is then because I'm not in the Logic world yet. Everyone wants me to use Logic. Oh, that was Jerry Marsh. There you go. So
Oh,
John
there we
says
go.
that was
Okay,
Jerry
so
Marsh.
I was right with one letter at least.
You're in the
Um,
ballpark. It was two
yeah,
syllables, one syllable, and it starts with G. So
yeah, there you go.
you're on the right track.
Well, that Logic group is great. I love
Yeah,
it,
right.
and because I had quit the other Logic group that's out there with all the pros, that want
Oh
to make
yes.
people who are learning feel like garbage. So this group is awesome. And I think that there are, even though it's, supposed to be like for beginners, I think there still is a pretty wide range of skill in there. And the people, similar to the GarageBand users group, the people want to help each other. And that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Very cool. I'll resist the urge to go on a rant about that and make that our rant about the whole professional thing because I know you and I are kind of on the same page with that, which is if it sounds good, it is good, and the gap between pro and amateur these days is almost non-existent. Sadly, some of the pros will not want you to think that, or will say things that will big note a pro studio or a pro producer and try and push down those of us that are just doing it in our home studios and on GarageBand, heaven forbid. But yeah, we'll leave that for another day and another
Yeah.
rant. At the middle of the show, we like to do a little bit of midpoint motivation. And I did actually use this topic a few weeks ago, but since you are the guru of songwriting, sorry, you're a humble dude, so that's going to make you really uncomfortable. Since you have a lot of experience running a songwriting Facebook group, you would have had this question a bunch of times. And I know many of you out there suffer from this, and many of you think about that. And that is writer's block. When you are at that point where you want to make music, you want to make music, you sit down and nothing happens. You just can't, for whatever reason, get any words on the page or any notes on the page, or you strum your guitar and you just end up playing Gloria over and over again. What do you, John, do in those? Do you suffer from this? And if you do, what do you do about it? And do you have any recommendations for the community about what they can do if they're hitting that writer's block wall?
I don't play Gloria over and over again. It's, I don't. I'm in the group that thinks writer's block is kind of a myth. The
Yeah.
only time I really experience if I'm trying to write a very specific thing, like if I'm trying to write a love song, or if I'm trying to come up with the final line in the verse of this song that's nearly finished, when there's just one thing that I'm trying to do. But if it's just you're coming up with a riff, coming up with the melody, writing some words, just creating something.
Hmm.
No, I don't think if you set the bar low enough, I don't think anyone can have trouble coming up with something every time they sit down. I think
Is
the
that the
important,
key? Is that setting the bar? Sorry to interrupt, but is it the people? You think people set the bar too high? You think that they're thinking that what they are doing is not going to be good enough, and that's why they seem to be blocked, as opposed to just letting whatever flow.
yeah, that or they're expecting to come up with a masterpiece every time they sit down. Like I know I've seen people post things like, like if, okay, so I record everything that I come up with that sounds like something. If I write a riff that sounds like a cool riff, I put it on the voice memo, or I tab it out really quick.
Mm.
And so I guess if you're looking at it as like, well, the only material that I'm going to keep is stuff that I can remember later,
Yeah.
then you're really limiting yourself. And I don't know, I've written what I think is a lot of cool stuff that I definitely would have forgotten if I hadn't recorded it or written it, kept track of it in some way. So yeah, I think you need to lower the bar a little bit with what qualifies as an idea worth keeping. And I think you need to do it consistently.
Yeah.
So there was a long stretch, and sadly I haven't been doing it as much lately, but long stretch where every Saturday and Sunday I would spend an hour writing and recording stuff. And it's not all recording in the DAW, it's just voice memo a lot. And you'll see when we go through the list later, voice memo is one of my top things that I use.
Yeah.
But I would do that every Saturday and Sunday, spend some time just coming up with things, whether it's guitar riffs, chord progressions, just writing out some lyrics, doing lyric writing exercises, some sort of creativity. Or even just like playing around with a mix and just trying some things with GarageBand. I think as long as you're doing something creatively, you're exercising that part of your brain, and it happens very easily then, and you don't get in a slump.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because I must admit I have the opposite of writer's block. I have time restrictions these days, so I can't wait to sit down. And when I sit down, things seem to just flow out. So I agree that I struggle the other way around, which is, where do I get time to do this? And that's where some of the tips that you'll talk about later, and that I do as well, which is just wherever you are, that we have these magical pieces of glass in our hand. These will always record whatever you have, whether it's you humming to yourself. I know like Jade Starr did a metal EP recently where all of her bass lines were just, when she's walking around, she's just going dum 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 dum. Like, just get that stuff down, because do not trust your brain. Your brain is the worst storage device in the world. Things will go in and they'll fall straight out the other side. So capture that stuff while it's there.
I do that. When I was driving, I haven't driven to work since the pandemic started, right? And I've been teaching remotely, but when I would drive to work, I would do what you were saying Jade does all the time in the car on the way. I'd be singing various things. One of my favorite things to do is take an arrangement that I had written in GarageBand or Logic and just do the instrumental version of that, and put that on my phone, and then sing over that to come up with melody, vocal ideas. But anyway, I one time I accidentally played one of these horrible sounding voice memos for my students over the speaker system in the band room. What I was trying to do, I was recording them on my phone so that they could listen back and hear it. And then there's what they hear is this awful recording of me going, my punk scream singing. Oh, so embarrassing. They got a good laugh out of that.
Oh, that is cool. I do fear that sometimes, because I do these sort of shows and I have a lot of stuff on my phone that's really not for public consumption. I'm determined that one day I'm just going to put one of my really random music memos or voice memos out there. But
I think you should make a whole episode out of it.
I actually think that would probably be good. Do it for the content, as the kids say. I think people would actually probably enjoy if I just went through my voice memos and played everything on there, because you realize that you're not as crazy as you might think you are, that we all do it, and that it's super common. So
I'd love to hear like Jack White's voice memos.
Right.
To hear how rough, maybe his aren't rough, but I don't know. I think that they probably all are rough sounding at first, and then we hear the finished product and think that it's such genius, which it is. But it'd be really fun to be able to hear where all the song, every song out there comes from originally.
Yeah, totally. And I think it would, to your point, I think it would actually make people feel better about what they're producing, because they realize that this stuff isn't coming out polished immediately, that there may be things that you need to change. And, I always say about, everyone starts at zero. Your first song is always your first song, and it's probably going to be your worst song, because you know nothing. You've never done it before. And then as you progress, you get better and better. And it's the same at the micro level with each individual song. Very rarely do I sit down and write an entire verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, ending of a song, and it all stays exactly that way for the whole process. It's always going to evolve and change over time. So putting that pressure on yourself to make it sound pristine straight away, Yeah, just forget it. Leave perfection at the door because it's a myth anyway. You'll
Yeah,
never
you
get
got to
there.
allow for the editing process. And the times when the song does fully form almost instantly, it's like winning the lottery. I
Yeah.
love that. But yeah, if you expect that, it's kind of unrealistic, I think.
Spot on. Comments here from folks. So, Mark, yeah, the red button freeze. Yeah, that's the other side of it. Is once you do hit that button, you've got an idea in your head. You hit the button, you get that red light fever, where suddenly it's not there anymore. That can definitely happen for sure. Dawn Janess, the singing nurse, very cool. Give life a little more, and then music. Yeah, absolutely. Derek, on the topic of professionals, yeah, I like that. The professionals get paid, amateurs don't. It's not an indication of competency or skills. Spot on. There's many professional musicians I would argue about the level of skills that they have. But anyway, we'll save that for another day too. O'Neill and Jones, sounds like a joke, but it's absolutely true. The search for perfection is a flawed one. Aim for existence instead. Yeah, just be, get your stuff out there, get things done.
And
Kim
it's a
says,
lack of perfection that makes a lot of songs cool.
Spot. Oh, yeah, exactly. We could go on another 15-minute rant about the
Yeah.
fact that sometimes those happy accidents or
Who
those
wants
things you think are
perfection
wrong.
especially in like rock music? You know,
Oh, my favorite singer of all time is Michael Stipe from REM. Would you say he has a perfect voice and sings perfectly? Heck no. But
no,
does
but
he
he has
sound
an
amazing?
awesome
Yes.
voice. Yeah.
Very cool. Kim says, I think my 15-year-old writer's block was definitely because I thought I had to write masterpieces in one go. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people are exactly there. Derek says, with writer's block, I think it's where a grasp of music theory helps. It allows you to experiment, e.g., don't know the theory, but we'll watch the videos on it and then try bits and pieces which spark ideas. Definitely agree with that. And I think that's where, again, we'll hold that thought. We'll talk about that when we talk Song Spark, because that's one of the biggest things I've got out of Song Spark is being quote unquote forced to use a particular concept in a song helps you learn about that. And then in future songs, I've used those concepts I've learned because I've had to quickly study the theory to keep up with you guys, and I've been able to implement those in future ones as well. Nick Hamby, welcome to the stream. I've got heaps of ideas when walking the dog in the forest. There you go. Yeah, most ideas come from weird places. It's why I think someone has to invent the shower recorder so that you can just have a button in your shower that links to your phone. It's just a recorder that then sends your ideas to your voice memos via Bluetooth. Because the amount of times you're in the shower and you can't get hold of a recording device because it's very unsafe. I think there needs to be a big red button in the shower that you just slap and then it records your idea and then sends it to your phone. That would be cool.
It's the first product from your new line, maybe.
There you go. The studio live today shower button
Yeah,
for your voice memos. Yeah, and Tom's agreeing with you that it would be interesting to hear a lot of artists' voice memos.
I'd love that.
Totally. There should be a whole series on that. We should try and that could be a next podcast adventure, John. If you could create another podcast, which is like artist memos, and it could just be artists sharing their rough voice memos of what they're doing. Let's jump into the second section because we've been alluding to it for a long time. But one of your passions and one of your areas of interest is songwriting. So, did you want to jump in and take a deep dive into your thoughts on songwriting, the process, how you go about it, and tips that you would like to share on the topic of songwriting?
Yeah, sure. So some of the stuff that I wrote down is just in random order here.
That's cool. We
So
love randomness.
the first one we kind of already covered. Don't wait for inspiration to strike. Just try to create often, and your inspiration will come from just exercising your songwriting muscles
Yeah.
frequently. If you do it often, then the ideas will come often. Overproduction kills songs. Okay. So that's at least kills my songs. You know, maybe you're a brilliant arranger and you can layer 45 guitars and 100 vocals and it'll sound like a masterpiece. But my songs, the more parts I add, the crappier the song gets, and the more unfocused it gets. So I've decided to hire a mixing engineer, putting out a couple EPs. So I've been getting the stuff together to send off to the first for the first EP to send to the engineer. And one of the things that I've had to do is just trim down everything. And a huge, and I guess I knew this already, but a huge, so I was going to say discovery, but reaffirmation that I had was that less is more. With a lot of my songs in the past, I had doubled up all of the guitar parts. And as soon as I got rid of those doubles, everything sounded bigger. The big rockin' chorus was even more rockin' now. And I thought that, by layering more guitars, because that's what Billy Corgan did, that it would, it would just make it sound more awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I stripped away, because I was sending it off to the mixer, I stripped away pretty much everything unless it was some crucial sound that I wanted. All the reverbs, the sends, the compression, the distortion, everything, saturation was all gone, and it sounded better. And so, overproduction kills songs. So what I wrote down was I try to stick with typical rock band instrumentation. So I imagine I look at the song and I say, would this be playable with 2, maybe 3 guitars, bass, drums, maybe a keyboard, maybe a wind player, but that's really pushing it. It's like E Street Band. Would it be playable in that format? If you would need 2 or 3 rock bands to pull it off in an orchestra, then maybe it's too much, at least for my music. I found that it sounds better the more simple it is. All right. And then I wrote down my songwriting process. Now, I don't use this on every song, but this is what happens often enough where I feel like this is my process. So I use a notebook to write down stuff. I use the voice memo to record things. And often I do both. If there's a specific way, especially if I'm playing with a capo or alternate tuning on the guitar, I tab it out, or I'll at least write down the rhythm and the chord progression. And then I'll do a recording of it too, playing. If I have a melody, I'll sing that. If I can sing and play at the same time yet, I'll do that. So I have a rough version of what that'll sound like. Mm-hmm. So if I go back to it a month later to record it, I still know what this on the paper means. And so in the notebook, a lot of times what I do is I'll use the right side of the page to jot down rough ideas. And like if I have any lyric ideas that popped in my head, I'll write down that. And then on the left side of the paper, things that I might use. And this is especially helpful if I don't know really what the song is about yet. Lately, my songs, I kind of have gone from the knowing what I want it to be about, and then I write the lyrics from there. But I've had quite a few where I just have like a cool sounding line, or I have a title, or a chord progression. And maybe like when I'm mumble singing, I come up with some words that I think sound cool that go with it. And then I write the song around that. And so when it's that second route, then I find this final ideas on the right side of the notebook. On the left side pages is where I write down just my idea bank, basically. And then as I edit and as I try things and mumble sing my way through it more and start to decide as the song starts to take shape more and I decide what I want to use and what I want to throw away, then the right side becomes more of like the rough / final draft. And the left side, I keep all my ideas there. And I probably only use like 25 to 50% of the stuff on the left side, but I have them there in case I want to pillage some of those lyrics for other songs, which has happened. It's common that I'll snag something that was originally going to go with an earlier song and use it as the bridge, or just another line, or I don't know. It's surprising how often that works, especially if the songs come from a similar narrative point of view or cover a similar topic. Often it does work pretty well.
Yeah, cool.
Let's see.
And when you're talking, just to touch on that point, when you're talking notebook, you're talking a physical notebook. Are you very much in the analog world at this point with your songwriting?
Yeah, spiral notebook.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them, and the like a tradition that I have is when I get a new one, I have my daughter design the cover of it. Cool. And so it's fun because my first one that I've been using that I'd used for years has all the drawings from when she was 6, and then when I get a new one, she's just about 12 now, and the art style is going to be completely different. So it's just a fun little thing for me. Yeah, because obviously I'm going to keep them. And when I'm old, look back, and then I'll also have this little keepsake cover that my daughter designed.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll let John continue, but I'll throw a question out there to the folks watching live or watching on the replay. Digital or analog? Who uses real things, as in notebooks, to actually write songs and to do their songwriting, and who uses maybe their phone or the notepad on their phone or their computer? I'm interested because I jump around. I'm currently all on computer mostly because when I songwrite, I'm doing it live here on the channel, so it makes more sense rather than to hold a notebook up to the camera to have my OneNote document there that you can actually see what I'm doing. But I must admit that there's something about having that tangible analog notebook in your hand that you can just scribble bits out and you can write bits in and you can pencil things around and even doodle and do some other things. So yeah, let us know, digital or analog, which side of the fence do you fall on? And we'll let John continue while you have a think about that.
So you actually made me think of something that wasn't on my
Oh, there you go.
document.
No.
So I took this. I've been slowly working on my master's degree. In this one class I took, the teacher had us, when we were planning out our project, she had us, when we were brainstorming, write things in different pens. And she had like a color coding system. But she said that it studies found that by writing in different colors, it triggers a different part of your brain. I forget exactly what the explanation was,
Mm.
but it helps. So that's something that I'll do pretty often too, is I'll do editing in different colors. Like I've got and I don't really have like a system, but like I'll write out like this part in the blue pen, and then I'll do like alternate lines in the red pen, that kind of thing. It's different from every song, but I found it, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's all in my mind, but it seems like doing the different color ink seems to do something too.
It's powerful. My sort of background in the corporate world is around customer experience and customer journey mapping, and we use a lot of mind mapping for ideas and that
I
sort
don't
of
even.
thing. So
Oh wait, that's what mind mapping. That's
yeah,
what it is. Okay, yeah.
which is look it up if you want to learn about the technique. It's a technique of using a combination of words, illustrations, and colors to actually have a more, because it's more in tune with how your brain thinks. Your brain isn't linear. Your brain is actually all over the place. So doing a mind map can mean that you can put something up here, then maybe for you having something in the top left corner is sort of your idea bucket. So similar to what John was saying with his notebook, having different buckets for things, but just having a piece of paper and some colored pens gives you that creativity to let your left side and your right side of your brain kind of come together, and then at the end you get a cohesive document that if you show to someone else, they will have no idea what it's about, but you and your brain together know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Hey, you keep making me think of things that I should have added earlier. So getting back to the writer's block thing, and I've been saying be creative as much as possible. One thing that for me is crucial is finding the right time of day to do it. For me, my mind is really working and I'm really energetic after I had my morning coffee. So that's why that Saturday, Sunday, when I don't have anything on the agenda at 6 a.m, that's the perfect time for me. That's the real sweet spot. But I think that could be really helpful too, is find when you have the most energy and when the ideas are really flowing. And hopefully that's not when you're having to work.
Yeah, that could be. I know that was the case for me sometimes too. And let's just say that there was a little notebook in my bag back when I used to be in the corporate world, and occasionally between projects that would just pop out and a few little ideas down there. So there you go. Just don't tell my former employer. We'll see what folks have to say about how they do this, and then John can continue on with his songwriting tips. So Gary Hubbs uses a clipboard. There you go. That's a cool way to go. Ethan's on computer. Barry Glenn, pencil, paper, and eraser. There you go. So using the pencil with the eraser, that's an interesting one there. Nick Hamby's on both the computer and a notebook, both phone, computer, and notebook, so all over the place. Joe Glenn is on the notebooks. Gary's got a small pencil in his beard. That doesn't surprise me. There you go. Sean Aaron uses a notebook. Derek's got both, so Apple Notes and also a physical notebook. O'Neill and Jones, both of them actually. Generally, if there's a guitar in our hands already, we'll reach for the phone, but there's something magic about paper that helps ideas arrange themselves nicely. There you go. Tom, I use either Text Edit, the Mac version of Notepad, or the Notepad in Logic. There you go. Notepad. I didn't even know there was a Notepad in Logic. So there you go. You can store your stuff there. Mark says both, kind of like John, notebook for lyrics, music memos for riffs and melodies. So and Derek says I use the color system too. Dawn likes the multicolored pens. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? So, and I guess the key thing for all of this is whatever works for you. If it's working for you, it's not wrong, because if you're getting good songs at the end of it. So there you go, Dan Ekberg, just jot down notes on post-its and then transfer it to notes on the iPhone. Oh, your camera. Like, if you want to use both, write it down. If you're at a dinner and you're like writing on the back of a napkin, don't just trust yourself to keep that napkin. There's a reason your phone has a camera on it. Snap a photo and file that away, because the amount of times I've had ideas, I've written them down, I'm like, where did I put that? I had a great idea for a song and now it's gone. So
You got to take a Sharpie and write it directly on your phone.
there you go. See, that's what I'm missing out. I thought you were going to say the back of your arm. It's
Yeah,
like,
that too. Yeah. Forehead. All over your kid. It's the possibilities are endless, Pete.
there you go. I haven't even thought of that. Yeah, if you got young children, just on your baby.
Yeah,
you
hold
can wear
still.
Got an idea. Go down. Very cool. Thank you to everyone for sharing that. And yeah, and again, if you're watching the replay, don't worry, we love you just as much. Any comments you have as you're watching, just drop those down in the comments of this video afterwards. And while you're down there are links there to where you can subscribe to John's podcast, listen to his music, and join the Song Spark Facebook group as well. Now that we took a bit of a tangent off to the side there, but let's jump back over to songwriting, wherever you are up to, and other tips that you have around or going through your process for songwriting.
Okay, so mumble singing is a big part of what I do. I'll come up with, usually I have like a guitar thing that I'm singing over, although I don't write a full chord progression most of the time and sing to that. Usually it's like the chord progression and the melody kind of evolve it together. But it's a lot of, just singing gibberish, trying out different notes, different rhythms. And then sometimes words come out too. And then things kind of take shape from there. So it's a lot of improvising with different melody lines and syllables and rhythm patterns. And then I don't know, it's kind of cool how it happens. Like once I stumble on an idea, then it often snowballs and things start to come together pretty quickly. Then I'll usually hit a wall for a while where I've got to figure out some more lyrics. And then once I get past that, then the song's done pretty much.
That is so cool. And yeah, if you've never tried mumble singing or using your doo-doos or your da-das or however you do it, it was revolutionary for me, because I thought I felt kind of ridiculous, and you'll feel ridiculous doing it. And again,
yeah, especially if you play it for your students.
I was going to say, hopefully you don't go and then play it to a bunch of students in public. But if it's just for you, it's actually the best way to do it. And I was very self-aware and sort of very self-conscious about doing it when I first started. And then I was reading an article one time, and I'm like, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, whenever he's writing lyrics, he just gets up there and he's just like, and then he's like,
totally see him doing that.
Dude looks like a lady. Okay, that's what we're going with. So yeah, I'm like, oh, okay. So someone I know actually does it. I'm not insane. So I think, again, having these groups and having these forums where you can chat about things, and you go, oh, you do that? I do that. Cool. I don't feel quite so bad now. So, and it is a good way, because there's nothing worse than sitting there and listening to the same rhythm or the same chords over and over again, trying to find that magic word. Just work out what notes and what syllables that you need in there first, and then the words can come later, as long as because the melody will kind of dictate what words you need to put in there, and then it'll all kind of come together. So yeah, good advice there from John. Go the mumble singing for the win.
Yeah, and I try not to dwell on something for too long, because a lot of it I wind up shaping more anyway. I might try some different chord substitutions or vary the melody. Most of the time I do vary the melody as the song progresses. So, I try not to stay too long in one part. I work for a while on the verse or what I think is going to be the verse, and then I'll try to come up with another idea. And as soon as I start to feel stagnant, I either just stop and go eat breakfast, or I'll do something, play some other ideas and then come back to that later. So I think that's getting back to the writer's block thing. I think another part of it is just avoid it when it could potentially come up. Just turn and go the other direction. Run away.
Yeah, and it's such a we talked last week about it, and one of my big things that I rant on a lot on this show and other shows is that music is supposed to be fun. It's a hobby that we have that we're supposed to enjoy and have fun doing. So if you're at the point of frustration where it's no longer fun, walk away and do something else, because you're not going to get just pushing through it. Yeah, in some things in life, you might just have to be resilient and push through when the going gets tough. I'm not saying don't ever do that, but if you are actively unable to continue on with the songwriting process and it's something you're choosing to do, the best thing you can do is to do something completely unrelated. And you'll be shocked at how often you're doing the other thing and something pops into your head. And that's why you got to have your phone or your notebook with you, because that's the point where you're doing it. The reason people say that in the shower is where you have all your ideas is because you're not thinking about anything up to do with that. And then your brain is just left to have all these cool ideas, and then you can go back to it. So if you're sitting there forcing it, not having fun with it, don't do that. Otherwise you'll end up resenting your music. It'll turn into a job and then you won't want to do it at all.
An awesome drummer friend of mine, years ago when I was jamming with him, he was telling me that he doesn't really play the drum set that often. And I was like, well, how can you be so good and not practice? Because at the time I was practicing constantly, right? And that just like was unbelievable to me. But he was like, well, I'm always drumming in my head. So it's just, he's getting these mental repetitions constantly. It's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And how many of us have ideas and melodies and songs and lyrics going around in our heads all the time? Like either something you've just listened to that you've just got that earworm, or something that you're working on. So capture those when they're there. Don't wait for the don't sit down there and go, right, inspiration now, because it doesn't generally work that way. It'll happen when you least expect it.
Some of my best choruses came to me when I was sleeping. Either the melody or the lyrics or both. And when I woke up, and if I hadn't gotten them either written down or in my phone, that would have been forgotten. You got to be ready when the ideas come.
Totally. Yeah, there's two. I'll mention these very briefly because we only have 30 minutes left, John. I told you this show flies by, doesn't it? An hour and a half in we are. But there's two things. One is the Keith Richards wrote the dun, 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 dun. He wrote the Satisfaction riff when he was like passed out one night, and he basically just woke up, hit record on the 2-track, and just went na 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 na, and then just put it down. And he woke up the next day, and Mick or someone came in, and they're like, "Hey, who's recorded here? What is this?" And they play it. And
so I don't know what that is.
He's like, oh, yeah, I must have played that last night when I was passed out. And it just came into my head. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the other one is that Paul McCartney said that the Let It Be song actually came from him in a dream, the same sort of thing. He was just there and he's just like, no, 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 let it be. And it was actually a dream of his mother who'd recently passed and who's just like, Paul, don't worry about things, just let it be. And he woke up and he's like, oh crap, what was it what did mum tell me in my dream? And then he's like trying to find a notebook. He's like, let it be.
Let it go. That was it.
Yeah. And he wrote Frozen, and that's a hard story for another day. But yeah, it's amazing how those sort of things can happen. So have something. I know there's people that have notebooks right by the bedside, or that have their voice recorder app ready and primed so they can just hit it and go when they have those ideas. And I'm sure many of our spouses and children and significant others have been annoyed by us waking up and going, na, 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 na. What do you mean? That's a melody. I got to get it out. Na, na, na,
yeah, maestro at work. They need to understand.
I love it. All right, I'll let you continue on here. What else about songwriting?
Okay, so finding the harmonic rhythm, and I laugh because that's the technical term, which I think is, I don't know, kind of ridiculous sounding for how quickly you change chords. And I think that's an important and often overlooked part. Maybe it's overlooked because it just comes naturally to a lot of people, but I know that if you come from songwriting from a mainly theoretical standpoint, you know what note you're singing and you know what chords will fit over that. I think there's a tendency to clutter up a lot of chords, to have in two measures to have 8 chords, just because you know that it'll work. It'll all go together and it'll be J.S. Bach. But for a lot of genres, that doesn't fit. That's not usually how you do it. I know in the like indie rock alternative world that I'm in, it's a lot of 4-chord repetitive patterns. And if I'm doing a circle fifths progression where I'm changing every 2 beats, unless it's a really special circumstance, a lot of times I don't think that's going to sound right. So working out the harmonic rhythm, how often the chords change, and how often you stay on one chord before you go to a point of interest, I think that really defines the sound of the song almost as much as what words you sing and what notes you sing.
Totally.
So the other notes I put, sometimes it's great to keep the chord changes sparse and save a certain chord, like the 5 chord, for the chorus. Really, really wait for that final payoff. Now, that's not going to, if every song you write is like that, that's not going to work. But
Yeah.
you could have your one song that does that. That makes it really powerful.
Yeah, totally. And I think it comes back to what you said before about the white space and you talk about the arrangement. I think it can be the same with your chords, is that sometimes we're like, hey, I know which chords I should be using that match in this particular key that I'm writing in, so I'm just going to use them all. And you're 1 minute into your song and you've used like 7 different chords because you know that you can use them all. And sometimes it's okay. Like I think we have this fear of the 3 chord rock song, that we're just going to be accused of being a 3 chord power chord rock song. That can work sometimes. There's a reason why some of the most popular songs in the world are 3 and 4 chord rock songs, because they sound good.
All right. So I don't know if this is a common thing that happens with composers and songwriters, or if it's just an observation I'm making here. But I was in a Beatles cover band. That was the first like good band that I was in after high school. And the early Beatles songs, a lot of them had a ton of chords. The ones that weren't blues based, different chord every measure, that kind of thing. And then their later songs, like if you think of like I don't know, like Tomorrow Never Knows, 1 chord the entire song. It seems that harmonically they got more simple as they went on. Another artist that I really like is Miles Davis, the jazz trumpeter, and he started off playing bebop in his early 20s. Complex chords, lots of fast chord changes, and then the stuff he was playing for the last like 30 years of his career were simple. 1 chord for a long time, and he would really do a lot of different melodic stuff over that 1 chord. So I don't know if this is like a common thing with composers, or if it's just 2 artists that I like tended in that direction. But for me, simple is better. I prefer a song that sits on 1 chord for a long time. And I think that there's a lot of energy and emotion you can build up from that than if you change chords constantly.
Yeah, I think there's something definitely in that, because I'm thinking about some of the bands that I like and know, and it does seem that way, that a lot of their earlier stuff, it was almost like, look how many chords I can put into one song. Like a lot of Queen's earlier stuff in the sort of early 70s through the mid 70s. You listen to a lot of their songs, and anybody find me, like that had 6 different chords just in the sort of first phrase. And then you go to like 7 Seas of Rise and I Want to Break Free and some of their stuff from later in the career, and it's just sitting on a chord, just jamming on a chord for like 4 measures. And yeah, I think you'd find that it's probably the case. And I see this with people in the home recording world, is that people kind of go, they start simple, they'll come in and they'll be like, okay, C, F, G, cool, I'm down, I can do that. And they'll just press record and they get good sounds. And then they're like, that's too boring, I don't want 3 chords. So they explore all of the augmented and diminished and 7th chords, and they just make it as complicated as possible. And then eventually they sort of work their way back. So yeah, I think you're onto something there, John. I think there's definitely a ramp up, and then potentially a ramp back down when you realize that sometimes less is actually more.
A friend of mine was a music theory major, and he, as a challenge to himself, wanted to write a song with every chord. Like every root note from the 12 notes of the scale, and every type of chord you can come up with. It's interesting sounding.
That would have been interesting. Would probably be the word for that. I don't know that that would gel for many folks from a listening experience. And again, that's why we write songs, isn't it? So that people can listen to them. What else you got in the songwriting process?
Okay, so getting back to my way of writing things down. So I talked about my lyrics using the left and right sides of the page, using colored ink. Often I'll have a specific way I write down, and I don't know if this is usable to anyone, but it works for me. I'll write the chords when I'm writing out guitar tab. I'll write the chord names on top, and then I'll write the melody notes below that. So I have a specific place where everything goes. And I feel like that just saves time if I know my system when I'm writing things. So if I have ideas that are coming really quickly, I can quickly get them written down without having to figure out like, oh, how am I going to do this? Or, oh, am I going to remember how to read this later? So I've developed my system for that. So I think that could be maybe something that you come to naturally, but if you I guess, don't have a way of writing things or don't have a consistent approach, that could be worth coming up with.
Nice. Very cool. I like it. Nice. Anything else?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so I want to get down to, I talked about recording or getting my parts ready to send off to the mixing engineer. So I have some tips from editing hell, because that's where I feel like I've been.
And I said to you beforehand, I'm like, I want to talk about this for a couple of reasons. So talk about the logistics, and then we'll chat about letting go of your own music, because that is something I know that myself and many others in the home recording world, we're just like, I can do it all myself, but does that mean we should do it all ourselves? So jump into the logistics, and then we'll have a quick chat about that.
All right. So the challenges that I'm coming up with. So I write the songs for song. A lot of them come from SongSpark, and a lot of them, because in SongSpark we have deadlines, I'm quickly trying to get something together, and I post wherever the song is at that point, and then I move on. And so for me, those are demos, right? I mean, they might be on SoundCloud, but that's not necessarily something that I'm going to be telling my friends and family about. It's the group knows about it, and that's about it. So now that as I'm going back to my demos and re-recording a lot of the parts, re-recording a lot of the vocals, guitars, bass, everything, and often tweaking the arrangement, I'm finding that I'm having to deal with a lot of things that I did 2-3 years ago when I didn't know as much what I was doing, or I was just racing to get ideas down. So these are things that I'm going to watch out for from now on, and maybe we'll save you a little bit of time as well. So here's what I put. Consolidate your parts. If possible, get your lead vocals on one track and know which one is the lead vocal. So I went through this period, and I feel like I'm just coming out of it now, where because of self-consciousness of my voice, or to a lesser degree, maybe that's what the song needed. If it's like a kind of more of a punk kind of song, I would have a lot of layered, not like Queen harmony, but a lot of just like layered vocals, double, triple, quadruples of the same vocal part, to beef it up. But a lot of times it's not really doing anything for the part. So I've been finding on my old songs that I'll have 8 or 10 or 12 tracks that are labeled lead vocal or lead guitar. And so as much as possible from now on, I'm trying to get the lead vocal on one track, and maybe I'll put it on multiple tracks if there's like a really different sound for that. Maybe I recorded with a different mic, and EQing it would be a pain, or some real reason other than I'm just getting ideas down really fast, and it's easier to just duplicate that track and record there than it is to actually go back and edit something. Same with guitars, but I've been finding it a lot with vocals, and it's been driving me insane. You don't need to tune everything. So I went through this period when I bought Melodyne where everything was melodyned, and there were a couple spots where I melodyned it and screwed up melodyning it and didn't have the earlier pre-Melodyne version. So I had to re-record the vocal because it sounds like T-Pain unintentionally because I didn't know what I was doing. So, all right. So if you use Melodyne, don't go nuts with it. And maybe don't use it too much at first until you know what you're doing. And definitely save as before you go crazy with the Melodyne.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so sometimes the out of tune part defines the sound. And I don't know. I solo my vocal, and because of self-consciousness with my voice, I want to tune every single note, but then it doesn't necessarily have the same flavor than if you're a little flat here and there, or a little sharp when you sing something more forcefully. And when you listen to, record, like I brought up Jack White earlier, Jack White's not perfectly in tune everything, but Jack White's awesome. Yeah. So I think it's easy to go nuts with the tool, especially if you're like me and you're kind of uneasy about the sound of your own voice.
True.
Make your vocal comps while they're fresh rather than leaving them for later. So if you're only using GarageBand, I don't know if you know what this is, but Logic, Pro Tools, they have a vocal comping system where you can record on the same track multiple passes of your part. It's not just vocals, it's anything that you record, and it saves all those versions. So then you can go back and open up all of your versions and say, okay, I'm going to take this measure of this part, this measure of this, and then it fuses them all together. Well, I made the mistake of just trying to quickly get my vocals recorded, where not only did I have 12 lead vocal parts, but each one of those had 24 takes that I had to sift through. So I didn't do that to myself, thankfully, in every song. Otherwise, I probably would have given up. But it was a lot to go through. And honestly, the last take was usually the best one.
Yeah.
The one that I decided to stop on. So I could have saved myself a whole lot of trouble if I had just listened really quickly and just mixed that part down right there and then, spent a minute doing that, rather than, a year later having to go back and refresh my memory for 2 days on what everything is.
Yeah, I think so much of that comes back to what you were talking about earlier about that seeking perfection and then trying to find things that are going to work for us. So tuning and then multiple takes, and you're right that you get to the end of that and it's usually the last take. And if you just go, yep, call it, print it, it's okay. That's the best way to go, because I think if you save it to later, your future self will be cursing your name, because it's a lot harder to do down the track. And
if it's just a demo, who cares? You can re-record that part anyway if you need to. Like
unlimited retries. That's it.
Yeah. Save the harmony vocals for key spots. I mean, this really depends on the sound you're going for, but I like the Beatles. I tend to want to put harmonies on everything, and then it takes away the power of the harmonies, so that's one thing that I've been doing, is going back and deleting a bunch of harmony vocals and really saving them for key moments. I feel like that kind of heightens the song, heightens the experience, and makes that part more noticeable. Then it makes it stand out more if it doesn't happen quite as often. Yep. And you could say that about any part, really, but for me, it tends to be the harmonies that I go nuts with.
Yep, totally.
Record softer. A lot of my earlier songs were clipping, and I didn't realize it. Yes. And I wound up having to re-record a lot of things or go crazy with isotope declip. But that doesn't always work. It seems to only help if you're just clipping a little bit on a couple parts. And even then, it depends on what type of part it is. It doesn't recover everything. So, and I'm not a professional, so, you have to figure this out for yourself too. But what I've been doing is trying now to record between minus 12 and minus 14 dBs. That seems to be okay. I don't clip. And it's, I can always adjust the volume of the region up or down if I need to make it more usable. But it seems to be safe, at least to record, and for everything, guitars, vocals, drums. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Pete?
Yeah, totally. And I was just going to say, for those, if you're sort of more beginner, intermediate, and especially if you're using something like GarageBand where you don't have as detailed metering, the guideline that I've always used and have recommended is 50 to 75% on your metering. So if you're up in the orange or the red on any sort of meters on your input gain, this is, so when you're setting your gain, when you're recording a guitar or you're recording a vocal, if you're anywhere up around that 90%, the chances that you're going to clip at least in some places, because you might do your test, you might go check 1, 2, 3, but then when you're digging in and you're actually recording the vocal or you're recording a face melting guitar solo, you're probably playing 20, 30% louder. The thing about digital is that it's got such, like, even if you're using a consumer grade audio interface with a consumer grade microphone, you're going to have such clean preamps going in there that your noise floor is going to be significantly low. So back in the old days, you had to hit the tape hard because you had tape hiss and you had noise floor and you had all these problems. And I think a lot of us are from those days, or have been told that by people that are experts or were experts 40 years ago. So a lot of people overdo their recording, thinking I've got to get it right up to that red line without going over. Whereas really, you can give yourself 20, 30% of headroom these days. And like you say, just turn it up in post. It's going to sound fine. You're not going to be introducing much noise at all, but you can. So basically, you can turn it up, but like you say, recovering from clipping is a heck of a lot harder, because digital clipping means that it's literally not storing that data. It's just storing that horrible distortion sound instead of the additional data, because it's ones and zeros. So it's not getting the top end of your guitar or your vocal. So whatever you use is having to do some magic voodoo to try and recreate what you haven't captured. Whereas if you capture it too quiet, turning it up, it's all still there. You just have to make sure it's not so quiet that you're introducing noise. So yeah, I love that tip, because it's something I see time and time again. People starting out recording too loud. They think it has to be louder than it actually does.
Yeah, you can turn things up, but once you're clipping, you're you're done.
You're done.
You can't really
That's
do
it.
too much. Let's see. Oh, this is so basic, but I don't know. I went back and listened to some of these old recordings, and I wasn't doing this. The groove to sound right, the bass and the kick drum have to line up.
Yeah.
For the most part. I'm sure there are exceptions, but I mean, for 99% of the time, if those are out of sync with each other, things don't sound right.
Yep, unless you're doing some funky syncopated Red Hot Chili Peppers vibe, then yeah, pretty much all the time, your bass drum and your bass guitar. They're both called bass for a reason, and if they don't line up, or especially if they're slightly off, woo, that's nothing can ruin a mix quicker than where you don't have that sync between your bass instruments.
Yeah, and Quantize doesn't necessarily do it, because if you're playing with the GarageBand or the Logic Drummer, those aren't to the grid a lot of times. To get more of a natural sound, they're a little bit off. And I think it's randomized too.
Does seem to be, yeah. There's definitely a little bit of that humanized, which is good. But again, yeah, if you just quantize your bass, you might find that it won't line up, even with a drum machine or yeah, especially GarageBand drummers and Logic drummers for sure.
All right, and then this is a thing that I think is peculiar to Logic and GarageBand. I don't think Pro Tools does this, and I don't know about the other DAWs, but when you bounce a track that's mono, if you're going to a stereo output, or what I did a lot of times is I accidentally did a dual mono plugin, then the track bounces to stereo.
Yeah.
And then it through some sort of audio engineering voodoo, it screws up your imaging. I'm no pro, but yeah, I mean, if your goal is to get mono parts that are recorded mono to output as a mono track, that's something that you have to do some research on, is to learn how to use your DAW. And with Logic, it's not always that straightforward. Like, there are a lot of screwy steps you have to go through to bounce a mono track to mono, if depending on what you have going on with the plugins.
Yeah, and we're short on time for me to rant on this, but GarageBand has the extra limitation of only supporting, especially the iOS version, only supporting stereo tracks when you're recording your own tracks. So everything is stereo, so be really conscious of that. That if you add some plugins and you try to put something panned hard left and you're wondering why you're hearing bits of it on the right, it's probably because you got some sort of stereo reverb or delay on what you thought was a mono track. So yeah, we can't go into all the nitty gritty of it here now, except to keep it in mind that if something's sounding weird, it's probably that your mono track has actually got some stereo effects or plugins on there that is bouncing around your mix and ruining your beautifully crafted stereo image.
Yeah. All right. So that's what I have for that. You want to get into some hidden gems?
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
Now,
this. I was going to say we've only got 10 minutes left.
So
we're going to have to yeah, exactly. We're going to do like Lynch does. We'll do the lightning round here at the end, and we'll do the hidden gems lightning round, because this is always it's my favorite part of the show, because I get to find out cool new things that I wasn't aware of. So we're going to start. We'll start with this one. So we did talk podcasts already, but this looks like another podcast here. Talk to us about No Dogs in Space.
All right. This podcast is awesome. It's a music history podcast, as it says, but the show so far has all been the history of punk music. And it's they spotlight a lot of bands that aren't, I don't want to say as well known, but not like the bands that you would typically think of. Like, there's no Sex Pistols episode, but they talk around that in other episodes. So they take an interesting path, I think, and get into some groups that you might not have ever heard of before. And it's on the Last Podcast Network. They've got a whole bunch of different shows that you might like. It's funny too. So that's a rec there that I think you'd like if you're interested in punk music for now.
I do, and look, your Beastie Boys there, Licensed to Ill, so that looks like the most recent one. So I'll be checking that out. I do like a bit of Beastie Boys, so grab that one. By the way, Tom, who's our moderator here, I will put these links in the show notes, so you don't have to break your fingers trying to get all the links in here, because we're going to go fast. So let's go to the next one. What is our debut album podcast? This one looks interesting.
All right. So this was a 1-season thing that they put out maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's these 2 comedians that have another podcast that's been around for years called Stop Podcasting Yourself. So the idea with this is they decided to write an album. They're both musicians, hobby musicians. And so each episode is about the genesis of that particular song. And they record themselves writing the song in the course of the hour episode. So they set a time limit to write the song, and you hear highlights of that songwriting process, and then you also hear highlights of them being in the recording studio, and you get to hear how the song develops from their earliest brainstorming session to the doing the final recording, and then they play the song at the end of the episode. And I think there are 12 episodes, right? 12 songs in an album. That's like the generic length.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So each episode is one song of the album.
Very cool. I like it. And Tom has put the link here. There you go. If you want to check out last No Dogs in Space, and our debut album is the next one we have there. Now the next one you've sent me, it's a YouTube link here, so probably can't play this because it's a Waves audio video here, but it's Andrew Sheps, and it's the Sheps omni-channel plugin is the one that you've suggested here. We'll see. Can we? Yeah, here we go. We can go to the Waves page on it. This is something you use, you recommend, you think is cool?
This is probably my favorite plugin, and part of it is I just really like Andrew Sheps. He gives some really good explanations, and he's got some videos that he recorded that are on the Waves website. They're like the typical promotional video where they're demonstrating the plugin, but he really goes in more depth than I've seen anyone else do with their signature plugins, more than, like your Chris Lord Algaes or any of them, where he explains all the different features, all the different uses. And he built in this one feature on there that I haven't seen in any other plugins, where it's like an educational component where his presets have, he's highlighted the knobs that he thinks that have the most tweakability. So if you're just trying things out, if you're just like at the point where you're just using presets and tweaking from there, he gives you you can't see it on that shot, but he'll highlight it, he'll have highlighted in blue the knobs that are the most tweakable. And I think that's really helpful if you're just starting out and you're trying to learn how to use a channel strip, how to use EQ, DS, compression, noise gate. Then it's got a preamp section that's got saturation, a bass boost, high and low cut. And the plugin goes pretty in depth too. There's a whole mid-side, each one of those regions there, you can go set to mid-side mode, and you can independently adjust the processing that it does to the mid mono channel and the sides. Which really is a whole can of worms in itself.
Oh, that's next level, yeah.
Yeah, and it's got really good presets too. He's got a whole bunch of artist presets. So Sheps has presets that would cover almost every one of your needs. Like if you're mixing your own demo and you need kick, snare, all that stuff, he's got good presets for all that. But then there are 8 or 10 guest artists that also put their presets. And those are all really good too. And I find that it's been a good learning tool for me just to see, like, if I want to see, what's Jakir King's idea of how you should treat a snare drum? And that's given me a lot of good starting points. And I felt gave me a better handle on just what people do. And then it also, if you're in a pinch and you're not really sure what sound you're going for, you can just go through and try things, and you often will stumble upon pretty cool sounding stuff. Very cool. Looks and the price has dropped too.
I was going to say, I mean, it's got one of my pet peeves, which is $149 on sale for $59.99, but with a coupon, $35.99.
Yeah, $35 is what it costs normally. Ignore all their sales.
Just take advantage of that, but just you don't have to rush. It's not unlimited. Limited supply on digital products is probably my number one pet peeve. But go and buy it because it looks like it's pretty darn cool, and this one looks pretty darn cool too. So JST Clip also on sale.
That's always on sale. Yeah, it's $19. It's a distortion or saturation plugin, and it's easy. It's a knob that you turn, and it sounds good. Like, I use it a lot on vocals, on guitars. If my guitars don't sound beefy or ratty enough, really easy to use. And it's got a couple other features, but it's mostly just to increase intensity and to adjust the output volume.
Beautiful. Yep, we are. Oh, sorry. I love it when you're leaving a page and it's like, what? But it's cheap.
Yeah,
quick.
Spend money.
Let's do it. Total Energy tuner, and now I'm in the market. I use Guitar Tuner, TUNA, at the moment on my mobile for guitar tuning. It's okay. Total Energy tuner and metronome. Why should I use this?
All right, I use this with my band students, and it's originally designed for is for band and orchestra people,
Yep.
but it's got a lot of really good features, and I find that it's the most accurate phone tuner that I've used. It does fine with high notes as well as bass notes. It's got an awesome metronome that's got a lot of presets. You can do a lot of divisions. I like to practice scales, doing different divisions. I'm trying to play like Frank Zappa, so it's helpful to have the quintuplet setting and the septuplet and all that stuff. So if you want to go in depth with the rhythmic end of things, you can. It's got a pitch function where you can have it play pitches, and I use that a lot for practicing singing. Like and actually for songwriting too. If I have a riff that's in E flat, for instance, I'll have it drone in E flat, and while I'm driving to work, I'll sing ideas over that. So I find a lot of uses, not just for the practical, tuning and teaching side of things, but I've used it a lot with songwriting because of that pitch feature.
And sorry, as you're talking, I'm looking at the cool screenshots. So it's available on iPhone and iPad and Apple Watch. So there you go. If you're an Apple Watch user, yeah, I guess it has a microphone. So you could, I don't know what sort of accuracy you get on an Apple Watch, but that would be super cool. Imagine if you're tuning up your guitar with your watch. I don't own one, but if you did, there you go.
Oh, and the smiley face, it's cute because it gives you a smiley face when you're in tune and a confused face when you're out of tune. So it's not too judgmental.
I like it. Just, yeah, it's not a frown, it's a confused face.
Yeah, it's
I like it. Well, yeah. Well, look, we're gonna just probably be about. You got 3 minutes. We're gonna go overtime here, John. If you're okay, you don't have anywhere to run to, do you?
No, I want to talk for another 2 hours, Pete.
There you go. I know.
This is so fun.
It gets that way, doesn't it? I know. We got into some cool stuff. Talk us through that. You talked about your love of spiral notebooks. Your last tip here is spiral notebooks. This is what you use, the Spirax.
No, I just Google image search spiral notebook just to be stupid. I talked about the spiral notebook. It's a valuable tool for me. I had band practice the other day and I threw it in my gig bag and brought it with. For me, if I've got to open up an app to get to my notepad, that takes too long. Usually the ideas come quickly, so I need to just be able to write them down. And one thing that I've been using it for as well is sort of just a catch-all. Like when I've been, I mentioned working on my EPs. I've been hiring drummers from a website called Sound Better, and that's actually where I hired the mixing engineer too. And when I was doing research on who to go with, I was using the spiral notebook to write down just the different people that I was considering and, little notes on them. I also used it to plan out the order of my EPs, the track order. I've been making a list of covers that I want to learn. So I just kind of use it as my catch-all too, not just for songwriting.
Very cool. And yeah, there is soundbetter.com. So that's the project you have underway at the moment, because I talked to you just before the show and I'm like, John, your SoundCloud has disappeared. I grabbed the link from the last interview we did and I'm like, this artist doesn't exist. So you're releasing music under a different artist name, I believe?
Yeah, it's the same account, but I think the link is different now because I changed the artist name to Oodles.
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 And we talked beforehand, you've got an amazing story about the name Oodles, don't you?
Okay, so it's not an amazing story. I was listening to Run the Jewels. They've got this, I forget what song it is, but there's this one line where Killer Mike says oodles of noodles, and I just think it's funny. So I just thought like, oh, Oodles, that's a weird band name. And I think that's what a band name needs to be. Just dumb enough to remember and untaken. So I've only got one song posted. It's a cover of the old I don't know what you'd call it. Not a doo-wop song.
Yeah, what was that? There's almost a barbershop type song.
Yeah. So this is my try at a sad alternative rock version.
Oh wow,
of Mr. Sandman.
That sounds amazing.
So yeah, but I'll be posting my EP hopefully soon. So
cool.
You can.
I like it. And this is the EP that you're getting mixed. So I know we're already over time, but what drove you to that? Because as someone who's you've been recording and mixing and releasing your own music for a very long time, why are you now going out to a mix engineer to help you?
Just because I don't know. I feel like I've been living in, like I called it, editing hell. Just recording hell, and I think that
Yeah.
I need some separation from it. I enjoy mixing, and I've enjoyed getting some other, some friend songs to work on, but I find it very hard to detach myself enough from the project and to be, I don't know, brutal, I
Yeah.
guess is one way of looking at it. Like if it's just left to me, my vocal is going to be very soft. So I need that outside party, I think, to
Yeah.
bring it to the next level. And also, I need a professional to work on it. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm still an amateur with
Yeah.
mixing.
Oh, yeah, and I was saying to John beforehand, I'm like, it's something that I need to really do because I think a lot of us get caught in this. I know I'm not alone with this, but I'm like, well, I can do everything myself, so I'm going to do it. And I think realizing when you can actually reach out and get some help and get some support from someone else is a good thing. You can go to a professional. There's also other groups where a lot of collaborations go on. So I, for instance, am bad at programming drums, and Jade Star is excellent at programming drums. So what happens when I want some drums? I reach out to Jade and say, hey, Jade, you want to drum on this track? And usually she's kind enough to say yes. And I know that you've done that, like you and Jason and Josh and a lot of the members of the Song Spark group. And we'll finish on this because we've talked all this time and I've alluded to it a bunch of times. But in the -3 minutes that we have left, so why don't we just spend a couple of minutes here talking about the Song Spark Songwriting and Composition Collective. So for the absolute novice who knows nothing about this, what is the Song Spark Songwriting and Composition Collective? Who is it for, and why should folks consider joining?
So if you're interested in songwriting, want to meet some like-minded people, but you also want to have a little bit of push to get you going creatively, I think that you should check out SongSpark. So what we do is we have a monthly prompt, the SongSpark, that it's a writing prompt. So it's you write a song based off of that prompt. And the idea there is you take it as literally or as non-literally. What's the opposite of literally? As you want. I usually just use it as a springboard. Like I'll incorporate some aspect of the prompt into my song, but it's not often that I take it to. I'm not too exact with it, but the idea there is it's just supposed to get a song going for you. And then we all post the songs at the end of the month. There's the deadline. You're supposed to post the song in whatever form it's at by the end of the month, and then we all give each other feedback.
It is indeed awesome. Yeah, Mark, who's one of the newer members of the group, who's one of our community here, had his first entry last
Awesome.
month. So very well done, got off the mark there. And I honestly owe a lot to John and Jason and the group because I was. When I started this channel, I was very focused on the educational side of thing, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to actually help people create music. But what I realized is that I wasn't creating enough of my own music. I was neglecting my own songwriting. So I basically jumped onto SongSpark and said, right, for the next 6 months, I'm doing one a month. I'm contributing every month, and I think I did. I got to 6 or 7 in a row before I kind of let life get in the way. And when I started this as a full-time job, time hasn't quite been there to do it every month. But my recent song, Murdering Time, that was a SongSpark based on the prompt that was to write a murder ballad. So that song wouldn't exist without SongSpark. And my entire album, so my album from 2018 called Selfish Aware, I had a look the other day, 7 of the 11 tracks were SongSpark songs.
Awesome,
so
yeah.
that entire album would be a very small EP if it wasn't for SongSpark, because just having that, and again, I call it positive time pressure. It's probably not a bad word for it, but it is just that it's the good, as opposed to the evil version of peer group pressure. It's the good peer group pressure. That's just, you're seeing other people doing this stuff. You're seeing that it's possible. And if you're doubting what you can do, sometimes the inspiration you get, I know people join up, and for the first 3 months, you may just want to lurk. You may just want to hang out there, provide feedback on other people's songs, see what's coming out. And then there might be a prompt that really just ignites you, and you jump in and you get started. So they've got 190 members. I remember when there was about 30 or 40 back in 2018
with 3 members.
There you
It's
go.
just me and a couple friends.
Yeah, so it's very cool, and it's a great way. Again, if you're new to songwriting, I know many folks here that have been here. Kim, who's just had to jump out, I know she's written 1 song and working on a 2nd song. So if you're a songwriter, it's a closed group, it's a private group, private community. You're not spamming all your friends on Facebook or anything like that. So it is all very much self-contained. So if you are a songwriter, or you're interested, you're songwriting curious, then it's a decent group to join. And they are friends, of course, of the Create, Record, Release group, and and of Studio Live today, and have been for a long time. So jump on over there. Where else can folks go to check out your podcast and your music then, John, before we finish up?
Songsurfingpodcast.com is the website. You can also search Song Surfing Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Like I said, Oodles. I've got my one song on Bandcamp and Spotify, and all the other streaming things. If you search Oodles, you'll find me. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Pete. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, it's one of my favorite times of the week because a lot of the times, a lot of the videos I do here are 5 minute and 10 minute because they're tutorials. You got to jump in and you got to dive into it. The fact to be able to sit back, and especially when I have a guest and someone with a lot of experience and knowledge like yourself, it's always a great time. So I do thank you for contributing the time. I know a lot of the folks here in the community will have got a lot of good tips and information. And what I want you to do with all this now is to put all those resources down and go and listen to those podcasts and watch those resources that John has mentioned. But go write some songs. Go grab your guitar, your instrument of choice, your keyboard, your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac, your PC, whatever it is, and do some songwriting, get some creativity done. Because it's one thing to do all the theory side of it, but you got to put that theory into practice and get out there and write some songs. Join the there you go. We've already got people joining. We've got O'Neill and Jones are about to join up on the Songspark group. So there you go.
Oh, all right.
And they're enjoying Mr. Sandman on Bandcamp right now. So there you go.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Connecting people. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to my guest John for joining us here on this one today. And as we say at the end of every show, please be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and keep creating, folks. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.